Good evening. As I call this meeting to order, this meeting is being conducted with a virtual component. Anyone wishing to address the board virtually may join the meeting online at https mountainview.zoom.us/j/8104755290 or by dialing 669-900-9128 and entering webinar ID 810475529190. When the chair announces the item on which you wish to speak, click the raise hand feature in Zoom or dial *9 on your phone. When the chair calls your name to provide public comment, if you are participating via phone, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Any emails received by 4:30 p.m. today were forwarded to the PSAB. Emails received after 4:30 p.m. will not be read during the meeting, but will be entered into the record for the meeting, which takes us, that takes us to roll call. Assistant City Manager Audrey Rambo, could you take the roll, please?
Yes, Chair Tang.
Oh, here.
Vice Chair Frink. Member Brodowski.
Here.
Member Langton. Okay.
Apologies, not of sound mind. It's my first full week teaching middle school. Very cute, very exhausting. That takes us to minutes approval for the PSAB meeting minutes, June 20th, 2024. Does anyone have any comments or questions about the meeting minutes?
No.
Seeing there is none, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
So moved.
I second.
Could you take a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Chair Tang.
Oh, yes.
Vice Chair Frink.
Yes.
Member Brodowski.
Yes.
Member Langton. Motion carries.
That takes us to item 4, oral communications from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the advisory board on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the PSAB from acting on non-agendized items. Would any member of the public like to provide comment on an item that is not on the agenda? If so, please submit a blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raise hand feature, click the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone.
Do we have any public speakers?
We have one. Bruce England.
Hi, thank you all and good evening. Bruce England, member of MV-SEPRA, which you're very familiar with. Got 3 comments to provide to you. One of 3 is we would like to encourage that your members, as much as possible, make motions and vote on the motions. This will help ensure attention to important matters that are considered by staff and council. We have found that in some cases, items of interest to us are not covered in outside bodies because we're told that there were no motions associated and no votes taken. So encouragement to do that. We also are curious about PSAB participation in expenditure plan decisions related to the revenue measure. The expenditure plan is going to be discussed by City Council at their September 24th meeting. So that's going to be of interest to your members and also to members of the public who follow these things. And lastly, I'm looking at AB 1909 at the state level. This provides a number of things related to bicycling in our city. One of the details in here is that the new law requires drivers to change lanes when they're passing a bicyclist. Used to be a 3-foot margin, which wasn't particularly followed or enforced, but for sure, this new law is not evidently being enforced. Even city vehicles and the community shuttle and so on stay in the right lane when they're passing cyclists with very little room to maneuver. Dana Street is one particularly bad example of this. There's also a new law that allows bicyclists to cross when the walk signal goes on, which they are doing. Cyclists are following that and taking advantage of that new allowance. And there's also new clarification on bicycle licensing laws that the police department should be aware of. And they might very well be aware of this, and they're they have their enforcement mechanisms in place for it, but it's not clear to me that that's the case. And certainly on the change lanes part, I'm not seeing any enforcement on that at all. And that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Next, we have Dana Peaty. Hold on one second. Go ahead, Dana.
Hi all, thank you so much. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Dana Peaty here for MVC Pro also. I just wanted to mention that we understand PSAB is currently operating with fewer members than the chartered 7, and we would like to know more about how that process is going. Does this group intend to fill all vacancies and return to 7 members, or contract to only 5 as a smaller odd number? We'd love to hear any updates you have about the timeline, the process, and the strategy for soliciting applications and interviewing or selecting candidates. And we also wanted to say thank you so much for fixing a tech issue we were having with previous meetings. In previous meetings, the agenda files and text files attachments were processed like images, so we weren't able to parse them like actual text that could be highlighted or made sense of better. And we just wanted to thank you for resolving whatever that issue was, because all the documents were super available and super easy to process and make sense of on our end. So thank you so much for that.
That's all.
Okay, I realized that I didn't have a pen on me, so I'm so sorry. I tried to take some notes. I heard concerns about the new expenditure measure and the new bicycle law enforcement, concerns about recruitment and our timeline for that, given our number of members. And thanks for resolving some tech issues with our agendas and documents. We'll now close oral communications and move to discussion/action items. To facilitate participation by all PSAB members, I'll be recognizing in turn each member who signals they're ready to speak. After all members who wish to speak on an item have done so, I will recognize members who have additional comments. So our first discussion/action item is the PSAB Mental Health Crisis Response Ad Hoc Committee report on feedback about North County Trust, MCRT, and BSU. So we've got Parneet Dinsa, our Human Services Manager, and I'm so sorry if I butcher your last name, Lemlem. Haley McHale from Trust will present this item.
Sorry, having a little technical difficulties today.
We're having some difficulties, but we are doing our best. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, you know what? Can you jump into Zoom? I'm in my HDMI and it's not working, so we're gonna do Zoom. Do you have the meeting ID handy? Where's the? How am I doing meetings? There we go.
Oh, 2190.
It was. No.
Sure. Sure.
You got it.
Yay.
Thank you so much for your patience and thank you, Michael and Parneet, for figuring out our technical issues. Yeah. No.
Thank you.
Thanks for clicker, unless you want to do it.
Right. Okay. So.
Go for it. Oh, what'd you do?
Was this yours or mine?
That's yours. Hold on.
That's mine, isn't it?
No.
Oh, we need to switch because my notes
Okay.
are there. Okay, so I'm gonna take your laptop so I can look at the notes. I'm gonna give this to you. And I'll also give you this. Oh, I mean.
Okay.
Down this. Okay, good evening, everyone. Human Services Manager Parneet Dinza. And as Chair Wang said, I am joined tonight with our Trust Assistant Program Manager Lem, as well as MVPD, who will be providing an update later on the Behavioral Services Unit. Next slide, please. So tonight's agenda includes an update on North County Trust, which will be presented by Lem. The agenda also includes an update on the trust augmentation evaluation, mental health first aid, the North County Mobile Crisis Response Team, Proposition 1, and the Behavioral Services Unit. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to turn it over to Lem to provide the update on North County Trust.
Hi, everyone. Lem Michael,
Could,
Assistant
could,
Manager for Trust.
could you come up to the podium?
Sure.
Thank you.
I thought I was gonna come speak from there.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I don't think I have another slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. So I'm just gonna go over kind of what Trust our field encounters, and our field encounters are described as us going out into the community and engaging with clients on our own. So we're not necessarily dispatched, but we kind of just go out into all of the 11 cities. And for Mountain View, we had 19. Dispatches, we had 16. That means that community members called and asked for our team specifically to come out. And our dispatch outcomes are escalations to MCRT, ED, or law enforcement. We had 2 of those out of the 19 and 16. We had 1 ambulance and then 1 when we had to involve our police officers to come and help us out in situations. And 12 of them were stabilized in the community, meaning that they were either transported. We conducted safety coping skills and just kind of de-escalated the situation and didn't need to be escalated. So a question that I have for everyone is, I want to make sure that we as Trust are continuing to engage with the city of Mountain View and being out there, people knowing about us. What are some places or situations where you think that Trust can be utilized so that we can go and make our presence known in the Mountain View community? Does anybody have anything? I'm thinking like PTA meetings.
I'm think, oh, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead, Joan.
I don't know where you're going. You say field encounters, that means when you're out looking?
Yeah, so we go out into the field and like,
So some of the places you're looking are on Castro Street? Anywhere else?
so they typically go out into like liquor stores, or if you see like in front of a grocery store, or they come to the downtown area as well. Mainly we go to where we would see people that are unhoused so that we can support them, provide donations. We have snacks and water and shoes and clothes that we typically would provide to people that we would do field encounters with.
And does that include people who are living in RVs on the street?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, those are some places that we typically would visit.
How, for instance, how often would you go to either Castro Street or I'm thinking of some of the areas where there are a lot of RVs parked?
So our visibility routes is typically like when the team is just going out and just cruising the streets of Mountain View. I think that we have them on schedule at least 2 to 3 times a week. Because we oversee, if we don't get a dispatch, yeah, they'll go to different areas. Sometimes they'll just go and park in certain areas. Walk out if there's like farmers markets or things like that. Community events, our community collaborator definitely outreaches to the city of Mountain View and knows about community events. So we often attend those as well.
So the 19 is how many people you run into?
Yeah.
And 16 are how many people that the police department sent you?
So not necessarily the police department, but just community members. So like,
Anybody who calls?
yeah, exactly.
So that's a total of 35 in a month. No, in 4 months, April, May, June, July, 4 months.
Mhm.
Do you think that's a lot or a little?
I think that our services should be utilized a lot more. And I don't know if it's because people don't know about us, people are like scared to call, so we try to get out into the community as much as possible. But yes, for 4 months, I would say that that's pretty low.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been in the field for about 9 years. Not with this program, but with street outreach.
I'll shut up for a minute and let somebody else.
No. I love your questions.
I just, have you any information from other communities to get an idea if you're doing a slack job or a very intense job? Anything to compare yourself to?
I would say our team does a really good job at getting out there and being visible. Because other teams kind of, not our North County team, but other teams kind of just wait out in their office while if there's no dispatch. But our team makes sure that we're 100% field-based. So we continue to just go along all of those 11 cities that we oversee and stay in the community as much as possible.
Well, my question really is, do you have any maybe documented evidence, maybe you've done a little research or something and found in Chicago, they have the same kind of program and they are doing, instead of 19 failed encounters, they're getting 100 every 4 days. I mean, do you have anything to compare yourself to?
I don't, but I can definitely find some information. I can check with my director and she can.
And it's just a thought I'll leave you with.
Okay,
That's all.
I appreciate that.
Comments from Vice Chair?
We're something. Go for it.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I get it.
If you're asking where you should be, I wanted to know, do you guys have any, doing anything in the media? Are you doing any radio interviews, say local, public radio, any social media? Because, so I work in the media, and where I'm seeing groups like yours get the most traction is right now on social media, because a lot of people of all ages are there. It's really difficult to have TV. TV is very difficult to find large audiences anymore. Radio was good, but are you in any of those spaces?
So our Momentum is the agency that oversees Trust. So they have social media and they also do share some of our trust information. I definitely will bring back to the team that's important. We can definitely have our own trust social media and not just Momentum. So I think that's an awesome idea. So we can take that back.
Yeah, because I just asked that because nobody that I know you guys exist. And I have a friend who I think maybe was impacted by a situation where your services might have been provided if you guys were called. And I don't actually know if you guys were at that thing or not. But the thing that impressed me about that situation is a bunch of people, according to what I was told, a bunch of people called, but they called the police. So they didn't call you guys for that situation. And so what I'm thinking is a lot of residents just don't know. But I think a lot of residents would love to use that service and take it and avail themselves of it if they knew it existed, particularly if they knew that someone was coming who could help like on the spot, which I think you guys can do, which is really cool.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna kind of ask you a question. Do you know of like any places or like specific resident places that you think that could benefit from our service? Because that's where I'm trying to make sure that we hit.
Well, I mean, I'm non-conventional. I mean, I think of it like as a field operation for a campaign. I would be in parks, just talking to people on the street. I
Yeah.
would be like on Castro and telling people there. I would go to churches, definitely PTA meetings. Any place where people are gathering is how I would do it, but I'm not, that may not be the conventional wisdom.
No, I appreciate it. We do attend like church events, showers, food giveaways, things like that. So we kind of make ourselves available at those, but I just wanted to know if anybody had like specific places where people should know about us. Feel free to.
Yeah, I mean, like the street aspect of your work, I feel like could also be used for outreach. It could just be, talking to people who aren't necessarily in need.
Yeah.
And where I'm from, we call that public relations, right? You're talking to non-consumer audiences, where you could, maybe spread the word, to somebody who just may, and, one time in 4 years, oh, I knew who I can call, and that might save someone's life,
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
More comments, Joe?
Yeah, one more question.
Sure.
Do you ever get input from the police department?
We do get officers who call our service and we kind of do like a warm handoff.
And so you feel like the communication's good enough with them?
I think they do an awesome job and they give us calls when it's not posing a public safety, but the person can utilize some assistance. PD just call.
Well, if it's awesome, it must be good enough.
So for my own comments relating specifically to your question, I live near downtown, so I think I probably overhear more people in crises correlating to days that perhaps Hope's Corner is giving out services, like, what is it? Wednesday, Friday, Saturday? And then perhaps like correlating with days that CSA is doing their what's it called? Their food distribution, that's the word. Their food distributions, and then they have some at is it called Klein Park? Where they do a giveaway at like Klein Park, and then is that Castro Elementary? So I would check those places out when they're doing those distributions. Rangsdorf Park might be a good place to be visible. Perhaps what's the street next to Costco? Is it Leghorn? Perhaps Leghorn might be a good street to be visible. So I don't know if you have considered those places already, but that's what I think of in places where you might see people that are in need, so.
I'm definitely gonna write down those things and I'm gonna have you double check it, but we do go to Hope's Corner. I think the CSA we also do, but Longhorn, is that what you said?
Leghorn.
Leghorn, yeah, so that area, definitely something that we can put into our visibility routes. Cool, thank you.
I have one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
So also like the city is like doing these little events.
Mhm.
I don't know what they are. I don't know if it's just a concert or if there's any kind of presentation, but maybe there's an opportunity there to speak to a small audience. And then also, do you have any corporate partners? Like I just like there's a ton of companies, and I've worked at some of them here in Mountain View, where people maybe not necessarily live here, but a lot of folks do. And maybe those folks, they have people who can help spread the word, at least amongst their local employee communities. And they can be good partners sometimes.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's feedback. Definitely something that we will strive to continue to do and serve in the city of Mountain View.
We could also make a film. I mean, just
Yeah,
You could make a film.
We've got a guy, I know a guy.
Yeah.
Any other questions or?
Oh, I do have a question. What is the difference between the stat that's law enforcement and like the escalation to?
Oh, that, so escalations just means that it was escalated, and then we just tell you if it was ambulance or law enforcement or CRT. So it kind of breaks it down. It's two, but it's just the one in one. Does that make sense?
Oh, so that too is broken down
Yeah.
into the ambulance or law enforcement.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You
I
needed
got
a
it now.
path, You needed to be over to the side.
Yeah. Indent.
Well, I think that's very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lem. So next we'll talk about the trust augmentation evaluation. So for some background, in September of 2022, the city of Mountain View, along with the cities of Palo Alto and Los Altos, received a federal earmark from Congresswoman Eshu's office to fund programming for mental health crisis response. As the County of Santa Clara's trust program fulfilled the original purpose of the earmark, in agreement with the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, also known as SAMHSA. The three North County cities, so Mountain View, Palo Alto, and Los Altos, decided that we would use the earmark to be repurposed to augment the County of Santa Clara's trust program. And so within that, we decided on the trust augmentation pilot program, which is committed to enhancing the services that are already being provided by trust through additional community outreach, case management, as well as mental health first aid training within the three partner cities. And through outreach and engagement with participating communities, the augmentation services aim to increase awareness and utilization of trust. And the augmentation also includes follow-up services for trust clients, including following up after an interaction with the trust program, providing case management, as well as assistance with social services navigation. And the augmentation also involves a goal of training over 1,000 individuals in mental health first aid in order to develop local community capacity to identify and respond to mental health crises, including referring individuals to appropriate behavioral health services. So I apologize, that was quite a long background, but I know it's been a while since we talked about this. So that was a little bit more on the background, and then part of that was an evaluation. And so an evaluation was conducted to assess the effectiveness of the trust augmentation, specifically how community outreach, case management, and mental health first aid training in the three cities was going. And how the city did that is that the city hired a consultant who conducted key information interviews, a community survey, as well as reviewing existing data from the contracted partner of Momentum for Health, Pacific Clinics, and the County of Santa Clara. So the most recent status we have is that in June, the consultant did share a draft of the final evaluation report. And the final evaluation report is expected to be shared in fall of 2024. Next slide, please. So next, a little bit about mental health first aid. So as I mentioned, this is one of the components of the augmentation. And this training is really there to develop community capacity to identify and respond to mental health crises, including referring individuals, to appropriate behavioral health services. And mental health first aid, also known as MHFA, teaches the necessary skills to recognize and respond to signs and symptoms of mental health and substance use challenges, as well as how to provide someone with initial support until they are connected with the appropriate professional help. Trainees learn factors and warning signs for mental health and addiction concerns, strategies to help someone in both crises and non-crisis situations, and also where to turn for help. So as of July 30th of this year, a total of 116 community members in Mountain View have been certified in mental health first aid. And this includes 35 City of Mountain View staff, comprised of front desk staff, public counter staff, who are often the first point of contact for our public. It also, the 116 also includes our local community-based organizations, volunteers, social service providers, as well as community members. And then in the city of Palo Alto, there were 226 members who have been trained and certified in mental health first aid. And for the partner city of Los Altos, Momentum for Health is in the process of working with the city of Los Altos to provide a training for their staff. Next slide, please. So next, we'll talk about North County MCRT, Mobile Crisis Response Team. And here on this slide, it shows kind of this hierarchy, if you will, of the County of Santa Clara's various behavioral health programs for fiscal year 23. And you can see that the MCRT is a little bit more on the higher side. So a little bit more intensive than TRUST, but a little bit less intensive than the psychiatric emergency response team. And the Mobile Crisis Response Team, MCRT, is a program intended for moderate to immediate level concerns. And this program started in 2018. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about, before we get into North County specific MCRT, MCRT is activated via 988, and it is for individuals ages 18 and plus, and intended for those displaying medium to high risk behaviors, which may meet criteria for a 5150 hold, which is the emergency 72-hour hold. It is staffed by County of Santa Clara behavioral health clinicians, both who are licensed and those in the process of obtaining a license. And while it aims to de-escalate situations and connect individuals to services instead of an emergency department or jail, law enforcement may be involved dependent on the nature of the call. And so in February 2022, the County Board of Supervisors voted to expand the Mobile Crisis Response Team program in North County, which includes the city of Mountain View. And they added 4 staff members to cover the County District 5 region. And that region includes the city of Mountain View, but also Los Gatos, Monte Sereno, Cupertino, Saratoga, Palo Alto, Los Altos Hills, and the Almaden Valley portion of the city of San Jose. Next slide, please. And so this is the data that we have for the North County Mobile Crisis Response Team between January and June 2024. And there were 21 calls that were made, which is a little bit less than half of the, 21 calls were made, and then 9 resulted in 5150 holds, and that is a little bit less than half of those calls. 2 calls resulted in triages and callbacks to 988, as the caller either requested information or required assistance that could be provided by 988 phone-based support rather than in-person support. An example of that was there was an instance where the individual needed support in scheduling an appointment, so they were reverted to 988. 3 of the calls were canceled. 4 callers refused services, and 3 of the callers the team was unable to locate. And in the situations where the MCRT team is unable to locate a client, they usually will follow up with the requester, which most likely happens to be a family friend or a family member who is calling on behalf of that individual. And they'll try to create a plan for when the client's location may become better known. And this is a case-by-case basis, so depending on who the requester is and the circumstances. So for example, if there was a client that would have a known location they would return to, the MCRT team would go back and try to go to that same location. And in some other cases, thank you, the requester may not know the client personally. And in that situation, the team would still make an attempt to do what they can, such as go out again to that last known location and see if there's some way they could provide assistance. The team did share one example in which a staff member went out to an approximate location. They were able to locate a client based on description several blocks away, and then they were able to complete the evaluation. Next slide, please. So next we'll talk about Proposition 1. And so for background, in 2004, California voters passed Proposition 63, which is the Mental Health Services Act, also known as MHSA, sometimes referred to as the millionaire's tax because it taxes 1% of annual income over $1 million. And that funding is reserved exclusively for mental health. And 90% of this goes to counties to use for mental health services. So on March 5th of this year, California voters passed Proposition 1, which is a two-part initiative aiming to improve access to behavioral health services by first amending the existing Mental Health Services Act, and two, creating a roughly $6.4 billion general obligation bond, which would fund two main components: behavioral health treatment in residential facilities, as well as supportive housing for veterans and individuals at risk of or experiencing homelessness who also have behavioral health challenges. Currently, the Mental Health Services Act accounts for about 1/3 of the funding for the county's behavioral health services, and it's primarily used to support services and staff. Next slide, please. So in terms of the service impacts with Proposition 1, it's really going to vary by county and depend on the county's collected annual revenue. So currently the County of Santa Clara uses mental health, the MHFA funds for services for all ages and a range of mental health conditions. And restructuring the funds would target a subset of this vulnerable population, as well as some prevention and intervention programs that could experience some possible disruptions. It would expand services, however, to include substance use disorder treatment, but at the same time, it would eliminate priority funding, priority prevention funding, for the county. And so currently with the county, there will be a new structure for planning, data gathering, reporting, and accountability across all of their behavioral health funding streams. And we are hoping to have a better update, hopefully in the near future. And then next, I will turn it over to MVPD to give an update on the Behavioral Services Unit.
Thank you very much. Ready for the next slide. I'll let you know that our Behavioral Services Unit was launched in early 2021 with the purpose of diverting calls related to people in mental health crisis from traditional law enforcement response and looking at alternative solutions. Our BSU unit resides inside of our neighborhood and event services. That is not coincidentally where you'll find our community outreach officer that many of you have met, Jenlia McPherson. And I would encourage you to think of our behavioral services unit in a very similar manner, but instead of community-based organizations that find housing or other services, it focuses on those in mental health crisis and bridging services, both community-based services and also public sector services related to mental health to those in crisis. The BSU unit consists of one full-time community services officer. She is present with us this evening, CSO Jody Pierce. She is also an associate marriage and family therapist and an associate professional clinical counselor. So the creation of this program is very much important to the police department, but also a passion piece for our CSO. And I think that's speaks to its success because it is important to everyone that's involved. Jody, CSO Pierce, works with CBOs, community-based organizations, as well as governmental organizations to help bridge services and work on many of the people in our community that are calling for 911 services frequently or that are being called upon for us to evaluate and look into their welfare and their care and needs. CSO Pierce reviews all of our cases and our responses to people in mental health crisis, either by reviewing and assessing those individual cases or by responding out physically. And that's about 30 it results in about a 35 to 40% response of either following up directly with them if it's appropriate or responding out to the scene. In that collaboration, as I spoke about before with that neighborhood and event services unit, is very much works in tandem with our community outreach officer and with CSO Pierce, our BSU unit. So they work in tandem because so many of their clients really cross over into both sectors of unhoused needing housing services or other services, as well as mental health services. Next slide, Michael, when you're ready. I have two kind of high level examples of the type of work that the BSU does. One involves over a 2-year period of working with a community member directly who was homeless and who was having chronic calls to the police department. Over that 2-year period, BSU was able to obtain mental health and substance abuse services for them, and eventually even housing for this person. That resulted in a substantial decrease in the number of 911 calls. In fact, no 911 calls for that person, but that is a 2-year process. So it gives you a good idea of the level of dedication and involvement that comes from that unit. Another significant case, although there are many, was a patient that took over a year of BSU's engagement and work. That resulted in outpatient treatment for mental health services, as well as a caseworker being assigned and a referral to the mental health courts in San Jose. That is one of, as you see in that third bullet point, the third big one of the main functions, in addition to the outreach and bridging those services, is being able to get people that could be sent to the traditional justice system, away from the traditional justice system and into mental health courts. They're better designed to meet their mental health needs and address at a counseling level, at a services, and in this case, case manager level to address the underlying causes and divert them out of the criminal justice system. That is the BSU's Behavioral Services Unit. Forgive me for using that acronym so much. In a nutshell, a very small nutshell, it does a lot for a lot of people. In fact, there was about, in just half of the year, kind of Q1 and Q2, but 606 different calls that were reviewed by the BSU. With that, I will give the floor back, I guess, to the chair. I believe that's the last slide. Okay, back to the chair.
Do board members have any questions before I open this item to public comment?
Yes,
Member Brodowski?
have to finish writing it.
Yeah, no problem.
You just talked about like a full-time community, no, that wasn't it. The question of somebody who was referred to the mental health court. Does that mean if you refer somebody to the mental health court, that he was probably on his way to a regular court for having committed a felony or a misdemeanor?
So I will say that the alternative to being sent, first of all, it's not easy to get into mental health court, and simply submitting a case to the district attorney's office does not get it to what I believe is often the best place for it, which is our mental health court in San Jose. The alternative is the case isn't filed by the district attorney because there's compelling reasons that the person, committed the crime and there's no jury appeal, i.e. they have mental health issues, or it's filed and treated criminally and someone with mental health issues is treated in the same way as somebody without them that made the decision to commit the crime, absent that kind of influence. So it can go either way, but frankly, it's very challenging to get cases into the mental health court system without that skilled knowledge and without, in this case, CSO Pierce and our BSU working with the district attorney and working with the mental health liaisons for the county to get those cases shuttled to where we believe they're best served, both for the clients, for the individuals, but also for the community.
But you have to do that before the DA gets to it.
We do it in partnership with the DA.
Okay.
But
You have to do it before something.
it takes doing. It is not, it doesn't happen regularly on its own.
Yeah.
So it takes conversations with supervising district attorneys that oversee those units and ensuring that the case gets shuttled to the right location and accepted.
If the person damaged some property or damaged a person, does it sometimes happen that the owner or the person is saying, no, I won't let that happen, he has to go to a criminal court? Does that
To
happen?
the best of my knowledge, I don't know that that the victim has to agree for it to go to the mental health courts. But not like in a restorative justice kind of type court. However, it does have to meet mental health criteria. And there are components related to what types of crimes. I would think that simple batteries and vandalisms are fairly consistent with folks in mental health crisis. But I don't believe that those would prohibit it. We've had cases off the top of my head that have involved threats, certainly threats of violence and vandalism, and have been sent to the mental health courts. So I would think that the batteries and other non-egregious cases would have to be sent there.
So I have one more question related to the whole mental health thing. I've rarely seen somebody that I think is having a crisis, but a lot of times I'm walking downtown and there's somebody walking along talking to himself in a loud voice or shouting. Is this a case that you have to manage, or do people just sort of brush it off?
So it could be that some folks that you may have seen downtown are people that would come onto the kind of BSU's radar and have mental health challenges, substance abuse challenges, and also do that behavior that you described. But simply kind of yelling and walking is probably not even going to get a call for us, quite frankly, in this era. But it really depends on the real level of details. How are they yelling at people? Is it very animated and intimidating? So it may come on our radar. If we get a call, and although I say mental health crisis, it really is mental health challenges that are an underlying factor. So in any circumstance that our officers, in any call that they respond to, or any circumstance where we dispatch them out in that computer assisted dispatch system, that CAD system, we create a unique number. Anytime that happens, our officers enter a hashtag or a call line so that we can then bring back that data, and CSO Pierce retrieves every single one of those hashtag CITs, whether they were sent to the call, whether dispatch sent firefighters to the call and they entered in that number, or our officers saw the person and then went out on their own. All of those are reviewed and evaluated. In the circumstance you're saying, if we don't know who the person is, there's probably not a lot of follow-up, but between Officer McPherson and CSO Pierce, they know who a lot of people are, so they can connect a lot of dots, and they're a fantastic team.
Okay, thank you.
I have questions. First, I have a comment for Lim. Again, unconventional, Lim, but maybe polling places, since there's an election coming up and people will be standing in line, and maybe there's an opportunity to talk to people while they're waiting. So yeah. A question for Captain Canfield, and I think I know the answer to this, but I just wanted to ask it just to say it out loud. Does CSO Pierce go on calls? And if so, how do you provide for her and her team's safety?
Yes, CSO Pierce does respond out into the field, just kind of as case by case specific. In fact, she is a member of our crisis negotiation team that responds to people that are in true crises. But she will respond either to a circumstance and to a person that she's familiar with and has a relationship with, or she'll go with an officer if the situation is more dangerous. So she is well-versed and skilled, one of our longest termed employees at the department, and well familiar with what is appropriate for her to respond to alone, but often it will be her and our community outreach officer or other officers, even members of our crisis negotiation team.
And secondly, and sort of related, how do you provide for her mental health? Because as we talked about before, a lot of the officers are dealing with really difficult situations. I would imagine the situations that she's dealing with are much more profound. So how does that work? Is it the same as what everybody else is getting, or is it slightly different?
Yeah, it is the same. I would say they're probably in some cases more profound, and in almost every case more abundant, because it's all of them.
Right.
So that we have a fairly robust employee assistance program, an EAP program that has first responder specific services, which really is essential for their success. So the city has done a fantastic job with providing, as far as I know, the best level of EAP services around. We also do have a 24/7 access portal. I'll be frank, CSO Pierce helps us update and keep that portal working well, with everything from immediate like text to some, a counselor if you're in crisis, to just resource direction. But, she's an expert on all of that direction. And we have a peer support unit, which she is also a member, but members certainly are not exempt, and often are folks that seek those services out because they understand the value and the importance of them. So those are all services that are available to her, and she is present at many significant incidents. We do critical incident stress debriefs where either a skilled clinician or a member of that team, that internal team, will lead a debrief, a very structured debrief to talk about the critical incident, the emotions that it arose, the steps and things that people took in an environment not too dissimilar from this, where everybody that was present is required to be there, not required to talk, but required to be present at those CISDs, those critical incident stress debriefs. So there are services available.
It's amazing.
Okay, so I have a couple questions of my own. This one is for Ms. Dinsa. So you mentioned that Prop 1 might lead to expanding services for substance use disorder treatment. Do you know any details on that? Like, would there be more funding for like medication assisted treatment or otherwise? Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And so to answer your question, at the moment, we do not know the details of what would be comprised of the substance use disorder treatment. But I hope and anticipate that those details would be shared throughout the county, and we can definitely bring it back to this group once available.
Oh, yeah, and will that final evaluation report for CHEST be shared with us when it comes out?
Yes, it will be.
Okay, yeah. Then my next questions are for the chief or possibly CSO Pierce herself. I'm noticing that you've got the man, what is that called? Associate marriage family. I only wrote the abbreviation. Marriage family therapist and associate
Professional clinical counselor.
Thank you. And I believe those are licenses that are like working on the way to the LMFT LPCC. Does that mean that CSO Pierce is currently being supervised by a licensed LMFT right now? Like, is there a timeline for completion to the LMFT LPCC?
Yeah, I think first I'll say that the work that she does is not specifically clinical work. So it does not require the licensure that we're talking about, but it speaks to the skill, dedication, and knowledge. The rest, I would say, So Kirsten, are you comfortable speaking to that, to your educational kind of process and CV?
Sure. I am currently supervised by a licensed marriage and family therapist. She is my clinical supervisor. I have a couple of months and I should be finished and be able to sit for my licensure.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
Yay.
big, that's coming up. Are you ever, I'm so sorry, are you ever, I mean, since you're here, are you ever like providing services like that in the field then, like, to the people that you encounter, like?
Yeah, it oftentimes in crisis, it becomes sort of a, I guess you could say, an impromptu therapy also with family members of individuals who are going through crisis. We're seeing a lot that do not have really the resources. So being able to speak with them and sort of help them through that moment, especially if their family members or friends or whatnot are going to on a involuntary hold. And then the individual that I work with Community Outreach Officer McPherson, a lot of the people that we have ongoing rapport with, it sort of becomes the impromptu, I guess you could call it therapy in order to help them, you know, with what they're going through. They go through a lot, whether they're living in RVs, also out at Life Moves. We do weekly visits out to Life Moves to speak with the clients out there. So yes, long answer to a short question. Yes.
Yes, thank you, appreciate that.
Oh, can I ask her
Yeah.
one more question? Since she's there, I mean, if there was one thing that the city could add to the program to make it better, what would your wish be?
Probably, sorry, chief. Probably like a designated officer to be able to do like a more full-time work for the mental health stuff, because there's a lot that doesn't get addressed, whether it's in progress. Although we do have a lot, our crisis negotiation team members, we have a large team and they're very well trained. All of our officers are trained in crisis intervention as well. So our officers do an amazing job when they're out, but being able to respond more to in progress, to be able to help the officers so that it can de-escalate and not, you know, possibly not even turn into an involuntary hold situation, be able to connect them with resources as opposed to the hospitalization.
Sounds like a funding issue. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I think we have, city is amazing. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, you know, making that work. And again, the community outreach officer and I, we do a lot, the chief said, the clients do overlap a lot. So I think that's been really beneficial to be able to work with her. She knows people that I may not know, and then we're able to sort of work together to get them the resources that they need on all aspects. Yeah.
thank you, Chair Tang.
Seeing as there are no more questions, would any member of the public like to provide comment or ask a question on this item? If so, please submit a blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raise hand feature or dial *9. Your phone.
We have 3. The first is Bruce English.
Thank you. A really quick comment. The discussion earlier about getting the word out about mental health services, I just wanted to mention the city neighborhood meetings run by the council neighborhoods committee members and members of staff. They're really valuable meetings. And I don't know, I'm sure the police are there. I know they are, but I don't know if staff is there to talk about the mental health services. I think that might be a really nice way to get the word out about these services. Thank you.
And Neighborhood Watch.
Next.
Not exactly the same thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Next, we have Tim McKenzie.
Hi all, Tim McKenzie, he, him pronouns. I thank you for talking about how Prop 1 will impact the county mental health services. I was glad to learn about these programs as PSAP was beginning and see them continuing to go forward and integrate. But the change in funding I think is causing a major issue. Prevention and the things that it looks like we might be losing are, I think, some of the most sort of upstream important things that we can hit. And try to prevent things from getting worse downstream. And I just would like to point out how the reliance on external funding mechanisms means that when those dry up, we end up losing necessary services, and trying to think of ways that we in the city, in the municipality, can reallocate resources that we already have within the general budget so as to be able to make sure that we don't lose these necessary and important services, and make sure that we are doing something at the city level to try to help provide and do things, because if we're relying on externals, it can suddenly change unexpectedly. Thank you.
Next, we have Dana Peedy.
Hi, all. Thank you so much for this information. You all answered a lot of our questions in the staff questions, so thanks for that. I'm speaking on behalf of MVC Brett, and I also wanted to echo what Tim just said about the importance of prevention and early intervention programs. And it would be great for this organization to keep an eye on what can be done at this local level, and keep an eye on what's happening with that funding or those programs, maybe as a work plan item moving forward if needed. Because we just agree that they're super important and we'd hate to lose something important. Thank you.
That's all. Thank you. I heard a mention of our city neighborhood association meetings as places to get the word out for trust. My city neighborhood association meetings are on Zoom. I don't know if other neighborhood association meetings are similar. Anyway, concern about the change in funding regarding Prop 1, a couple calls for reallocating the general budget to prevent the loss of necessary services, such as prevention and early intervention programs. Okay, we'll now bring this back for PSAB discussion. Any board members have comments?
I just have one. I think just have one. Just so Bruce knows, the community meetings are different than the neighborhood watch. We have a neighborhood watch program in this city. I don't know how subscribed to it is, but it would be another place where Lem could maybe provide some more outreach for her program. I've spent a lot of years in that program, and it can be a very successful way of spreading news about programs to our residents, who will then go out and tell other people.
What I'm hearing is perhaps like somebody on neighborhood watch duty could call like FCRT or trusts and instead.
No, so in neighborhood watch, you have a monthly or quarterly meeting, and if it's done like we used to do it, a bunch of people come to someone's house, and the way we did it, a city officer would come, and maybe a council member will come, and they will have an agenda, and they will talk about things that are important to that particular neighborhood. And so you can present information about your neighborhood or things that the city is doing, initiatives that the city's doing, to a very small captive audience who is interested in the topics.
Your neighborhood's still doing.
This is my neighborhood in Florida. I haven't done it here.
Oh, okay. I understand.
I would love to do it here, but I don't know if people here, I don't know how active it is here. Chief Campbell.
Chair Ting?
Yes.
For perspective, Neighborhood Watch was very robust in Mountain View for a long time, but it has, there is not a current interest, or we have not had requests to revitalize the program. I think it has been, whether good or bad, replaced predominantly by
Next door.
And that seems to be the new marketplace, which may also be, perhaps if I can make a recommendation, there may be a lot of traction on Nextdoor.
Yeah, for sure.
To plug trust, because it does have a lot of neighborhood specific conversations, but that has kind of shifted to the new Neighborhood Watch. Certainly, we're not opposed to reinvigorating it if there's community interest, but it really is very much driven by the community. So without the community wanting it and being willing to do the heavy lifting, we'll come out and teach it. We'll help support it, but we need community neighborhoods to want it and to be motivated for it.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Seeing none, that brings us to 5.2. Our Mountain View Police Department Youth Services Unit Annual Report, School Year 2023-2024. Sergeant David Shen will present this item. Welcome.
All right, thank you very much. Happy to be back here. I can't believe that it's already a new school year. That went by pretty quick. For all of you who don't know me, my name is Sergeant David Shen, been with YSU right now going on the second school year. And this will be the second year of our YSU annual report.
Sorry, the laptop's not working and I had hopes of doing it from my phone.
Like, should I sing a little tune? Has like hold music.
You know, it's just real.
Mike's having a hard day at work.
So the HDMI cord's not working for some reason, and I'm trying to see if I can. But I've never tried to share a PowerPoint presentation from my phone.
The first time for everything.
Does anybody know how to work magic with HDMI? Because we always have trouble, but right now it's just being funny.
How easy would it be to give your presentation without PowerPoint?
It would be easy for me. I'm absolutely happy to do that. I have a local right on my local file, so I'll just get started then.
I'm sorry. For the public, I will post it tomorrow morning.
It's also a link to our agenda, correct?
It is the report.
Oh, the report, but not.
The report is linked.
Very
Okay.
similar to what the deck looks like. Obviously a lot of the data and the things like our values all pulled from the report. So feel free to refer to that, which I think everyone should have access to. So just to get it kicked off, the agenda today will obviously I introduce myself. We'll talk a little bit about the YSU overview, the overview of the Youth Services Unit, our values. We'll talk about our goals for this school year or for the last school year, the outcomes, training, partnerships, regular programs and activities that we run. We'll dive a little bit into the school visit data, arrest details for any of the arrests that the Youth Services Unit made. And then looking forward and obviously the most important time for question and answers. So to talk a little bit about the Youth Services Unit, which I'll probably be referring to inadvertently constantly as YSU, so forgive me for that. I wish this is probably the one slide I wish was up, but currently it's comprised of one sergeant, myself, 3 school resource officers that we currently have, 2 police assistants, and one new exciting thing that we had for last school year, kind of the tail end of last school year. And obviously this school year as well, as we just put on 4 what we call youth engagement officers or YEOs. That is a current collateral assignment within Mountview Police Department. One thing I do want to say about the YEOs was the selection process as we went through it. We held that benchmark of what makes a good YEO, really similar to the very, very selective benchmark that we hold our prospective SROs to. So certainly nothing was compromised, nothing was sacrificed on that end. We really have a mindset of if these are going to be the officers that are going out and interacting continuously with the youth of our city, we hold them to a very, very high standard. I think the interview and the selection process reflected that. Certainly wasn't a collateral that just everyone was selected. We were very, very selective in such process. Excited to say, actually, I'll just throw this out there. One of the YEOs that we have actually is our COO, Officer McPherson. We're very excited about that. I think her passion, generally, obviously outward facing to the community as a whole, really shows in her desire to also become a youth engagement officer. A little bit of a change this year for us organizationally within the unit. We did have one SRO, SRO Delira. His current assignment now is a detective. So good for him. I think that during that time, he was kind of nearing the end of his tenure as well. And we have a new SRO for the last school year, the tail end, SRO Leopold. So very, very excited to have her on. Definitely that school year, there's a little bit of flux. Obviously onboarding a new school resource officer at the time too. And during that kind of the tail end of that year as well, we did have, it's happy news, but we did have one school resource officer go on FMLA for a while. So a little bit of a short-staffed unit at a time, but I think we were able to work with it pretty well. Talking about the values of the youth services unit, and I think a lot of these values reflect the PD as a whole as well. But specifically as we talk about, kind of the relationship that we have with our schools, with our youth, there are 4 tenets that I like to call them tenets, and I like to think of it akin to kind of legs on a table. I think I mentioned this last year, so it's not anything new that you guys are hearing, but whoever's hearing this for the first time. So the legs, I look at building trust, one of them, safe school community, empowering youth, and restorative justice. The reason I call it a table is I feel like you take any one of those, what I call legs away, and the table falls down, right? If you don't have a safe school community, you're certainly not going to have trust among the community. If you don't empower youth, you could have a safe school community, you can have trust, but ultimately that entire table serving the community and serving the youth falls. So building trust through our unit, the foundation starts at the youth level. We understand certain aspects like generational trauma. We do value a high level of cultural intelligence, clearly with the amount of diversity that we're lucky enough to have in our city. And we do operate with a harm reduction mindset, especially when it comes to substance abuse. I think generally one of the things we look in the past of the certain programs is, really when you talk about substance abuse, we can't really operate in the mindset of just say no. I think there's clearly a lot more that has to go behind that mindset to stop things like substance abuse. Restorative justice, we know that, kind of that justice mindset really goes beyond an arrest or a citation, right? When it comes to youth, I think it's especially unique with how certain things affect their mindset and affect their outlook, whether it's with their future, whether it's with the police moving forward. And to be very frank with you, I think sometimes an arrest or a citation, especially when we're talking about youth in a very stage of their lives where they're easily molded, that can sometimes, I feel, and I think our unit shares the same mindset, is a Band-Aid solution. So we do, ultimately what we want to do is we want to help students understand the effects of their action and really help facilitate a more productive avenue of growth. And I think that's really one of the key words there, as opposed to just referrals to the criminal justice system. We empower, or our one of the things that I look at is I want to empower our school resource officers to look at it from a case-by-case basis and not look at things with kind of like a general sweeping, if XYZ happens, it's a citation, it's an arrest. And I think they've been doing a pretty effective job at that. Empowering youths, one of our big portions of where our unit spends a lot of time is regular programming. We'll get into that a little bit later. But programs and activities that allow for organic growth and motivation. We look at our programs as more than just a one-off program. It's great to have, a day where police go out to the schools and, read books and say hello. But our unit looks at more recurring programs. We want to look for kind of longer term positive impacts that we have on our youth in our community. Safe school community, clearly that's the top priority, of course. Without a safe school community, I think really everything else falls apart. So this really has to do with kind of some hard truths of studying various debriefs of past tragedies, understanding risks to our students in the greater school community, looking across safety as a broad spectrum. So this includes studying a lot of debriefs that we have of clearly a lot of the unfortunate incidents, tragedies, shooting incidents that occur across our nation. So we do spend a lot of time training and really understanding not just kind of the tactical response. I think it's easy to stop there, but really the underlying effects of why these events happen in the first place is important to us. Talking a little bit about the goals of our youth services unit, and this carries on. Obviously, these were our goals last year, and they're our same goals this year. Again, create a safe school environment, reduce referrals to the criminal justice system, prevent and reduce juvenile delinquency. And one of the big ones, obviously, is positive engagement and relationship with the school community. in looking at the outcomes of the last school year, so some of the metrics that we'll talk about, clearly one of the things that we wanted to improve on last year was our reporting of the data. That still continues to be a challenge, and I think you'll see that in the later slide that will continue to be our one of our things moving forward to improve on. I know one of the things that obviously yourselves PSAP was looking at was capturing specific time spent on the campus, which I think the chief alluded to this fact. He mentioned the hashtag CIT. We went with a similar approach and we implemented hashtag SRO. So that occurred in March of last year. So it doesn't capture the entire data. So there was a kind of a period of piecing our original reporting with hashtag SRO. I think we walked away at the end of the school year with a pretty accurate number. But to talk about our outcomes, we do have over 500 hours of school-related events, 15 education safety presentations serving a total of over 330 students. We conducted a total of 45 home visits for 46 students for the year, and approximately about 200 hours of on-campus incident response. I'll dive a little bit into that, into a little bit more detail on that at a later slide, or the slide that I could see at least. But it is about 200 hours of on-campus incident response. So that's limited to, oh, look, we have it up, perfect. So I'm on slide number 5. Perfect timing, because numbers are just numbers if I'm just saying it into the air.
This one. How was to turn it on?
There we go.
Yeah. I don't know where you are, but here.
No problem. Perfect, right here. That's even better because we got to skip by the pictures of me on the front. So on-campus incident response, one thing I'll talk about what we classify as an incident response. That would be either a call to obviously our dispatch center, Mount View PD, whether it's 911, whether it's non-emergency. I will tell you this, the relationship that we've built, or not we've, but the relationship that the school resource officers have built with each individual school really allows the incident notifications, actually most of them, the majority of them go straight to our SROs. So they're really kind of bypassing, granted, if it's an emergency call that warrants a 911 response, that's different. But your general school policy violations, maybe potential behavioral issues or concerns, the vast majority of those bypass our dispatch center. I think there's a lot of, I think that's a positive because it's going directly to a school resource officer that may have a existing relationship, positive relationship with a student that really allows for more effective response. Changing 2 slides, one other. Training. As we talk about training, you know, clearly training is one of the big, is huge for the youth services unit. So, you know, you'll see training, obviously tactical response for school and community violence, active shooter training and prevention, threat assessment are some of the things that are, you know, they're great training and they're absolutely crucial for our SROs to have. These are kind of the harsh truths that we have to face sometimes, that we have to train for, more reactive. But on the flip side, we also spend a lot of kind of what I call proactive training. We've taken courses on autism and trauma-informed practices. I'll say this much, the trauma-informed practices training was really geared towards middle school educators. We took that on purpose, not only because a lot of our incidents that happen kind of within that middle school realm, we want to have that same training as the educators themselves. I think it's almost more value to us in some senses than the educators themselves. Crime prevention through environmental design and another kind of harsh truth that you know, hopefully we'll never have to go across is fentanyl overdose responses and investigations. Talking a little bit more about the trainings. Let's go to my secondary slide here. One thing I do want to say is currently two school resource officers are actually on the CNT, the crisis negotiations teams. All of us are CIT certified. So that certainly helps us out in kind of more sensitive interactions that we may have with the youth. All right. Moving forward.
CIT,
Crisis intervention training.
crisis intervention training certified.
Yes. One of the things that the youth services unit really understands is we can't do this all ourselves. I think it would be amiss for us to think that, I think generally as the law enforcement profession, we'd be naive to think that we can do this without the support of with our community partners. Obviously, they left, but communities like Trust. We look at it the same side at the youth services unit, right? So we partner with Stanford Reach Labs. I think we talked about this a little bit last year, is research and education from Stanford to empower adolescents and young adults to choose health. A lot of this revolves around substance abuse, right? We know that we're not going to be the experts. We may encounter it a lot more than maybe some other agencies do, but we certainly aren't the experts at that. I think that's one of the things that we have to understand and really kind of look back and look at the experts over at Stanford, right? With them, it's specifically the new and trending issue of nicotine use through accessible vape pens and devices, which is probably one of our biggest issues that we're having in our, especially in our middle schools. So we do close work in collaboration with the doctor over there and helping create and optimize their specific harm reduction curriculum. Another one was new one for this year was really exciting was YMCA Youth Drama for All. So that's really to build a relationship with special needs community participants who are doing that program for their love of performing arts. So we've partnered with them and have had them come to several of our events just to really interact with specifically with special needs kids. And I think it's really a mutually beneficial kind of interaction. Right? Allows us to see effective methods in communicating with those and potentially the neurodivergent community, but also gives them an opportunity to really ask us questions. A lot of them have, kind of see police officers and really don't know exactly how to interact. And I think it's a good platform for that. We've worked really closely, personally myself, with a special needs class over at Landells too, which kind of turns out to be one of my favorite destinations these days. So we really made it a very kind of clear effort to dive into that particular community. Challenge Team, I think you've all very familiar with that. Again, with Challenge Team, we talked a little bit about, oops, my slide real quick. So we regularly facilitate and attend the monthly Challenge Team meetings that happen over at the police department. Again, just kind of echoing what I mentioned previously, one of our beliefs in the unit is really our ability to listen to our school and larger city community, provide platforms for members in the community to include the police department to not only learn from each other, but to build those collaborative bonds with the ultimate goal of empowering and fostering new opportunities and outlets for our youth. That's clearly Challenge Team's, one of the Challenge Team's main goal as well. One of the greatest things that I've gotten out of Challenge Team is really the direct communication with the youth, particularly within Mountain View High School. Working with their YAC has been really kind of eye-opening for us as well. There's the ad hoc committee. Did you want to just go over that real quick?
We'll do that separate.
Okay, we'll do it separate. Perfect.
YAC.
Advisory committee, youth
Yeah,
advisory.
the Youth Advisory Committee. Yep, high schoolers. All right, the meat and potatoes of the Youth Services Unit. So similar to last year, these are some of our programmings that we hold throughout the year. So Dreams and Futures is our summer program that we hold for our elementary school and our middle school kids. We have 2 weeks with the elementary school kids, 2 weeks with the middle school kids, total of 128 participants. You slice that in half for obviously your elementary and middle school kids. One of the cool things about this is It's not just the school resource officers running the program, it's us and then a total of about 40 youth counselors. I think this year, our number was 9 of the youth counselors were past Dreams and Futures kids. It's really hard to look at, and I'm going to be constantly saying this, so I probably said this last year, so if I'm repeating myself, I apologize. One of the tough things with the youth services unit is how do you measure success, right? You can't cohort a youth and look at their life, for the next 20, 30 years and say, okay, we consider this a success. That's always been very difficult for us. Generally, we look at kind of our relationship and our rapport with the kids as a success. I think this is one of the few things that we can really look at and say, hey, 9 of our 40 counselors became counselors for the DNF kids. So it's really neat to have that metric. Just to back up a little bit, our DNF Dreams and Futures participants are referred to us by either school staff, so that could be from teachers, from administration, from our at-risk counselors at the schools, or our SCEFs, which I remember the acronym this time, it's School and Community Engagement Facilitators.
Thank you.
I purposely wrote that down. Very proud of myself.
That was a traumatic moment for you last year.
It's on the front page of my notes right here. So these are kids that are referred to us. So we don't, we may have a school resource officer that will kind of put a little bit more weight on a potential selection just based on past experiences or incidents. But the majority of our selections for the program come directly from the schools. So again, when you talk about 9 counselors now being involved in the program, I think it can be pretty compelling. We run our PAL mentoring, our Police Activities League mentoring program, a total of 54 sessions. So that's happening same as last year. Mauna Loma School and Castro School, we have 38 participants, and that's a weekly meeting. So that happens every week for the majority of the school year. New last year and continuing this year is our PAL ROAR mentoring. And that happens at Graham. So that's very similar to our PAL mentoring at our elementary schools. The unique thing about that particular program is that it's facilitated by a subset of middle schoolers that are basically running that program for middle schoolers. And we provide the resources, we provide the content. At times, we also give them the latitude to be able to create their own content. So it's really students mentoring students, which I think, again, I think there's absolutely value in our school resource officers and our police assistants facilitating it. But at times, I think it could be even more compelling to have their peers being able to deliver that. And it really gives a sense of leadership, accountability, responsibility. ROAR actually stands for responsibility. I'm gonna have a SCEF moment right here. I have it. Okay, we'll circle back to that. We have our Run, Hide, Defend trainings that we run. So you may think about that in the past as our active shooter trainings. The county has gone to the language of Run, Hide, Defend. So we facilitate those trainings, particularly to our schools. We've recently done one for the Mount View Los Altos Adult School, and we continue to hold those trainings throughout the school year as well. Vaping education is pretty self-explanatory. We had our annual youth extravaganza where we invited students across our entire school district and also just generally our youth within our community to an event that we had in Ringsdorf Park. We run our cup, right? I'm going to go back to this because this is very important to me. Responsibility, ownership, ambition, and respect. There we go. Okay. We run our annual Cops at Care program, which is, of course, one of our biggest events of the year. Our annual toy drive that happens around Christmas. And then we have an Explorer program that's under the Boy Scouts of America. We currently have about 10 Explorers. So that's basically youth within our community that get kind of embedded, for lack of a better term, within the police department. They don't necessarily have to be interested in becoming a police officer, but really gives them a look at what it's like to be a police officer when it comes to investigations, maybe tactics, just kind of a general law enforcement mindset for them. Going to a little bit of data around the YSU programs. Again, PAL Mentoring's 47 weekly sessions, 47 participants weekly. ROAR is 30 weekly sessions, 50. A little different this year. Unfortunately, we weren't able to facilitate our PAL boxing. Oh, I didn't advance it. Thank you. We weren't able to facilitate our paddle boxing or our Battle of the Belt program. I think that was a little bit difficult just given our turnover for the unit. Keep in mind there are 3 SROs that are facilitating this, and not to mention the police assistants. There were also some kind of an increase of incident response. I'll go into that for a slide in the future. Dreams and Futures, we had a total of 19 sessions occurring during the summer with 106. Explorers, we have 10 explorers, 22 participants. And Cops That Care is our annual, like I mentioned, toy drive once a year. Total of 984 participants. Very big event. Okay, next one. All right, so specifically talking about programming and outreach. So our programming and outreach, we talk about our PAL Mentoring, ROAR, Cops That Care, like I mentioned, Dreams and Futures, but also we made a very cognizant effort to really increase our community outreach events for this year. So that can include school events, school visits. We brought a lot of the community outreach events in-house. So this past school year, we probably did the most amount of general classroom requests would come in from various schools for PD tours. So we did a lot of PD tours and we brought it in-house a lot. Community events with other organizations as well. And in total, we did over 514 hours participating in community outreach events and regular youth services units and PAL programming. So keep in mind, these are just the hours to execute the events. So the hours that go into planning and preparation are not included in this. Go next slide. As mentioned earlier, I know there was some interest in the last annual meeting that we had last year for time spent on campus. So we were able to do that, like I mentioned, with hashtag SRO. Please keep in mind that this data comes from March moving forward, is the slice. And as you can see, these are the top schools that we spent specifically for incident response. So as mentioned earlier, we did spend approximately about 200, so specifically 191 hours on school campuses related to incidents. Again, at the request of school administration, either when they believed a criminal or school policy violation may have occurred, or maybe some sort of counseling opportunity that the school resource officers would respond to. So other actions related to these incidents are often completed away from the school. So one of the things that we wanted to be very cognizant of is our presence on the school. So as time permitted, we would conduct whatever investigation or counseling in person on school. If anything needed to happen from a follow-up perspective where the officers did not have to specifically stay on school grounds, we took that opportunity. So this also does not reflect the hours that were done kind of on the back end for follow-ups. This may have flowed into things like home visits. This may have been phone calls to the students, to the parents. This would reflect just physical officer presence on campus. So as you can see, Graham Middle School had about almost about 60 hours, Mount View High 24, and as you go down, those were the responses to the schools. We certainly spent the most time at Graham Middle School. I think just in general, looking at it kind of broadly, middle schools are definitely where we spend the majority of our time when it comes to incident response or counseling opportunities. I think that's just the nature of generally kind of the timeline of growing up and really kind of finding yourself as a young person. So that's not surprising to me. There were a lot of kind of repeat opportunities with certain youth. So they just happened to be, I think in this case, happened to be at Graham. Next one.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Right. How many kids are at Graham Middle School, more or less? Like 500 or 1,000?
Yeah. I want to say it's probably, I want to say probably closer to 500.
Okay.
When we talk about high school, that's when we talk about 2,000 kids for the high school.
Are there about 2,000 at Mountain View High?
Yes, yeah, Mount View and Los Altos, which you know, SRO, I'll say to clarify, our school resource officers don't respond to Los Altos High related incidents per the request clearly of the city as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
158.
That means that you've got 4 times as many students at Mountain View High, but you use twice as many hours.
Yes.
So
At-
that's essentially 10 times as many incidents in Graham.
Yeah.
Is there a particular reason, something that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think it's just the nature of being a middle schooler, and some of the issues that kind of arise, whether it's socially, whether it's, and I say this anecdotally, of growing up and finding yourself as a young person. I generally think that's just where a lot of the issues arise. When we talk about substance abuse, particularly in the arena of vaping, the vast majority happens in middle school. You'll see a trickle in, surprisingly, elementary school, probably closer towards 5th grade, very far and few in between. But vaping is predominantly in middle school.
Yeah, Crittenden is quite a bit
Yeah.
less. Any particular reason?
I think another aspect of that is, as I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of repeat opportunities with certain
You mean you had
students.
1 or 2 students who were responsible for 90% of the calls?
I don't unnecessarily say I would attribute that percentage to it. I think at Graham, there just happened to be more students that required more assistance from our school resource officer.
All right.
Yeah, so just so you know, Graham's got 800, 850 to 881, depending on the year. So 800 and 900 students. So it's not quite. It's not
It's about
quite
half as
full.
much as, about half as much as Mountain View.
Yeah, and
Okay.
we talk about,
All right. And so it's about 4 times as much, but still, that's a
Yeah.
huge increase
it
in
is,
per
it
person.
is.
Yeah,
I think these are opportunities as well. So when we talk about dreams and futures,
you're trying to put a spin on
but truly I do as a unit, I think those are opportunities, especially to flow into some of our more proactive programming. The majority of our middle school dreams and futures participants come from Graham. So
Okay. Mhm. All right,
we'll go on the next slide.
I'm not criticizing staff.
Oh, no, I didn't take it as that. So juvenile arrest, just as a baseline for understanding, there's a few different options when it comes to how we resolve things in the youth services unit. So it could be admonishment, it could be kind of school administrative resolution or counseling. The other option is issuance of a juvenile contact report or a JCR. That's akin to a citation ultimately, or physical or custodial arrest. So we talk about the arrests that we've had. We only had 2 last year. So I won't go into great detail for these cases, but one of them was a physical arrest, and this one was where an investigation revealed, and the origin of this was from a school resource officer, revealed an adult was having unlawful sexual relations with a minor. I will say this for this particular case was this wasn't the original basis for the contact, but through their investigation, it was revealed that unfortunately this was happening, and that resulted in a physical arrest. The second one, which was a citation for 2 students, was 2 students were engaged in a physical altercation on school grounds. And unfortunately, a school staff member was intentionally struck. When we talk about a balanced approach to resolution of these types of incidents, I will say this, one thing that we do take very seriously is the safety of our school staff. Clearly, the safety of the students themselves. I think one thing that we do take more of a hardline stance on is when school staff are intentionally assaulted. I think you really have to kind of understand really what's kind of a wake up in this is not something that is appropriate. And in this case, we felt a citation was appropriate. Next slide. So moving forward, almost nearing the end right here. So continue improve data collection. I think we have a good foundation of what that looks like. We do want to make that more robust. I think we expand data collection into looking beyond just capturing numbers and spitting them out to you. But I also look at data collection kind of internally within the unit as well, and understanding how do we take things like potential threat assessment concerns, and how do we kind of streamline that to our threat assessment team. So we're also trying to make increased kind of leaps and bounds or improvements within our internal data collection and routing of where that information goes. I think this goal of ours will probably stay for the next few years is increased vaping and substance abuse education and prevention. I will say that we did seize significantly less specifically vaping devices this year. I think last year was about 200. This year was about 30. I would love to say that that's because of our increased vaping education prevention. I think that's a piece of it. But I will say this as well. I think kids have probably just gotten smarter on how to keep that from administration. So I think that's a challenge and an opportunity for us to understand better as well. Another one is identify new challenges and apply a proactive approach and address individual school challenges with a balanced approach. So we see one of the opportunities is, clearly incidents at Graham. So we want to address, kind of understand the school specific dynamic and apply a balanced approach. And I think we did that, especially as we talk about the unfortunate event where a teacher was assaulted. Really continue to apply that balanced approach across each school. Another thing I will say is, we're always looking for opportunities to expand our programming where it's still effective with the school resource officers that we have. One of the things that we've been very cognizant of is not overextending our SROs to the point where we've now made certain programs ineffective. But one of the things we would like, and this may be more of a kind of a Santa's wish list type thing moving forward if we have the capability, but potentially bringing back that DARE program to a pilot school. Ms. Strahl has been absolutely wonderful to work with, and the administration has been very, very interested in having, they see Castro across the playground and see the mentoring program, and they've been very vocal about potentially bringing that there. So I think a potential for bringing a DARE program to that particular school is something that we can explore, and hopefully it's an opportunity to move forward. All right, time for questions and answers.
Do board members have any questions before I open this item? I have a question. I may have missed this. How are the youth counselors that were not Dreams and Futures alumni chosen? Is it same as the campers?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of them were kids that, well, they're not kids anymore, but they were past students within the schools that had a good kind of rapport with our school resource officers. They may have been in the PAL mentoring program. I think a lot of them actually came specifically from the PAL mentoring program. But those are ones that kind of continued the relationship through their elementary school, through their middle school, into their high school. And for a lot of them actually past their high school education careers, and really kind of built that bond with our school resource officers. I think I'll just throw it out there. James Guevara, I'm sure a lot of you know James. He's probably, I may have said this last year, but being with James Guevara will make you feel like the most unpopular person ever, because he literally knows everybody. He has an amazing ability to keep in contact with these kids, and he's been able to pull a lot for that program as counselors.
Are you guys servicing or able to provide assistance to any or do you even have any unhoused students?
We have a lot in the RV community. A lot of them have been in our Dreams and Futures programs. So one of the things actually that brings up a great point is, you know, we look at the school resource officers and we kind of have this notion of them handling incidents at school. But I think there really is a ripple effect, right? So any incidents that may occur, not necessarily in a school environment, that may occur, whether it's potential mental health issues, behavioral issues, many of which happen in the unhoused community. The school resource officers are called upon to assist in that just based on the relationship that they built in these programs. But yes, the short answer is absolutely. Yeah, we have a pretty big subset that come from that community.
And then also in your PAL and Battle of the Belt, do you have a significant participation from girls in those programs?
Battle of the Belt, not so much, because that there were, but that one, Battle of the Belt, was mainly flag football. PAL boxing we did. That's one that we really want to bring back. Just to those who aren't familiar with PAL boxing, it's an after school program run by our school resource officers, hopefully by our youth engagement officers as well, where they basically train boxing. It's not, you know, they're not actively fighting each other or anything like that, but really it's an outlet for their energy in the form of boxing. In that particular program, we did have a lot of female students, and it's something that, you know, we hope to bring back.
I just would offer that women's flag football is exploding right now, and
Yeah.
There might be an opportunity there to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right.
Chair, before you go to the next step, if I may, the Explorer program was mentioned at length. I just wanted to mention that former chair and former staff member Jeanette Wang was a graduate and a member of our Explorer program for many years. I want to take all the credit for her exceptional success. She is as a person, but tiniest sliver.
We also have probably at least a handful of officers, current officers that have been explorers as well.
Absolutely.
Seeing as there don't seem to be any other questions, would any member of the public like to provide comment on this item? If so, please submit a blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone.
We have two. The first one is Dave Luker.
Yeah, hi. This is Dave, calling in from MVC your faves. Yeah, thanks again for the high-level summary of, I think, the restorative justice approach in this presentation, because we had a few questions about that. I think we are still wondering, you know, how, I forgot to mention, I have two comments. But the first of our questions is, you know, how do you, the police department personnel participate in the restorative justice work exactly, right? Is it SROs only? Is it youth officers as well? Like, we'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about what the work entails specifically. And then the second item here is with the youth engagement officers, trying to get a little more information about how exactly that works. So kind of like the workload, right? Is it like less than 100% of traditional duties? Is it an opportunity in addition to regular responsibilities full time? Are they subject to the same feedback mechanisms and performance reviews as SROs? Are they in uniform? That sort of thing. So those are my two items. Thanks.
Next, we have Bruce England.
Thank you, Bruce England, also a member of MVCPRA. These are not all MVCPRA comments, but there's at least one that's mine. Unfortunately, there are 8, but I'll keep them really short. First of 8. Specifics about program funding, especially if overtime is considered. would be interesting to know about. So I'm just bringing that up. In the programs and activities table, it says due to numerous reasons, these programs are not able to take place during the 23-24 school year. Wondering if that could be elaborated on. The comments about activities such as Battle of the Belt makes me think about activities that perhaps are not based on teams and competition. There are some students that don't care for that. Wasn't clear if that was accommodated in some way too. This is for me. The home visits does concern me. Not entirely sure who gets to set up a home visit, under what circumstances, and if families are able to opt out. Fifth comment is about run, hide, defend presentations. Of course, safety isn't just about shooters, and I'm wondering about things like disaster response, especially if disasters should happen during the school day, which could happen. Number 6 is under vaping. Education, just want to confirm that health is the main consideration, not that people are following the law, which may be a secondary. 7 is the number of hours reported for the community outreach events, where it says community events with other organizations. That reporting of hours on the low side, and yet seems paramount. That should be maybe higher if it could be. I'm not sure what accounts for that. And lastly, on the fentanyl related overdose, does that also include any staff or student response training? Since that can happen on campus during the school day. Thanks.
That's it.
All right, I have a borrowed pen. I did not capture every comment, unfortunately. I know I'm gonna get some flack for this. I'm a Luddite today, I'm sorry. I got some comments on restorative justice, some curiosity about what that looks like. That does remind me, I was going to ask about restorative justice. Percent, I only wrote percent of duties. Suggestion for activities for students that are not based on competition. Some concerns on disaster response versus active shooter response. Number of hours devoted, and I was not able to write anything after devoted, so sorry. But that does beg the question for me. I did before this meeting have a question on, restorative justice is quickly becoming a buzzword, a target of some communities. So can you elaborate a little more on how you implement restorative justice when you're on school campuses?
Yeah, I think when we talk about restorative justice, I'm probably specifically more talking about kind of the options that the school is having that mindset. So I do agree with you. I think it's kind of become a buzzword and it's almost become kind of nebulous. But my interpretation of that is when they are faced with a decision to make, when, let's say, for instance, there could be probable cause to make an arrest or issue a citation, that their decision-making is based ultimately on what is beneficial for the child and also what helps that particular student have the mindset of understanding the impact of their actions and looking back and not kind of applying that Band-Aid approach of just an arrest or a citation. So I hope that answers your question, but really looking more holistically in kind of the end solution for what their option be. And ultimately, one of the goals that we have is really limiting the referrals to the criminal justice system when it comes down to it. I think it could be easy to again, give a citation or arrest a student, but at a certain age, ultimately kind of putting them down that pipeline may not be the best or most productive choice.
And Sergeant Shen, if I can piggyback, even the Santa Clara County Juvenile Probation, perhaps specifically, the Santa Clara County Juvenile Probation Department has a juvenile justice model that certainly you can look up and read, but it is focused on the holistic approach to the youth, preventing them from being incarcerated, limiting exposure to the criminal justice system and their holistic development. The titles have shifted over the years, restorative to youth focused. I'd have to look at the current exact language, but it is very much, even when we make a referral to the criminal justice system, for example, with the battery on the teacher, those are not handled in a classic kind of traditional criminal justice system manner. They are done for the benefit of the student, both for their ability to have consequences from their actions, but also for their overall long-term health. So there is not in this county an option of crime and punishment. That doesn't exist.
I had to ask because there, you know, being an educator, there are many people in communities who think that restorative justice means no consequences. And so, you know, I just wanted to have you clarify for the community.
Certainly, and it has evolved where we have had restorative justice panels, and there's been literally things that offending students have done to make right the crimes to the victims. There are many different models, but the overall driving focus is on the health of both the offender and the victim.
Also in the past, when we had PAL boxing, a lot of another option that we work closely with school administrators is ultimately they're the ones that make the decision when it comes to how the school resolves issues, especially when it comes to school policy violations. That's their decision. But sometimes they'll actually refer them. One of them was PAL boxing. So looking across, maybe not necessarily having a kind of hardline discipline, even on their side, but they would actually refer over to PAL boxing as well back then.
All right, bringing this back for PSED discussion.
A few years ago, they called it pretrial intervention when we talked about it during MVPDX, right? It was like a.
That's right. We brought in the community prosecutor, deputy district attorney in Colorado that talked about the San Antonio County District Attorney's approach to juvenile justice and how they work with the juvenile probation department in the courts.
Other comments from the board?
Another question, it wasn't clear why this year your PAL program dropped out.
PAL boxing?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry if I didn't mention that. It was mainly no, I think I actually did mention that. It was mainly a staffing issue. So it kind of fell into the part where we're onboarding a new school resource officer. And the timing was, you know, we had another school resource officer go on FMLA for an extended period of time. So we just didn't have the manpower at the time to facilitate PAL boxing.
And are you going to be able to do that this year?
We're hoping to. PAL boxing is pretty intensive. I want to say we do it 2-3 times a week. So it could be maybe a truncated version of it. Maybe we're doing once a week, but we do want to bring it back. I mean, it was a very popular program. I think it was one of our more effective programs through and through. So we like to.
Effective, you probably want it there.
Yes, we do want it.
Okay.
For the record, you did mention that. And number two, it isn't necessarily competitive amongst the students themselves, is it? It's you're teaching them.
Yes.
Right.
Great clarification. So it's not internally competitive. Now that's an option.
Right.
We've had PAL boxers in the past actually move on to competitive boxing tournaments.
Very famously, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's certainly not a program to route you into boxing.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty cool byproduct of it, but really an outlet for energy. So, yeah.
All right.
Girls football. I'm counting on you.
Pickleball is pretty big these days.
It might be in the Olympics in 28. So.
Yeah, like.
Yeah, right. No, that's not coming next year. Next one.
Point of order, before we move on to the next item, does anyone mind if we take a
5
little
minutes.
bio break? Gotta use the facilities.
I mind, you have to hold it.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I propose we vote.
Yeah.
All right.
Are we? We're in. We're in,
Yeah,
okay.
I think so.
Well, welcome back, everyone. We are now on item 5.3, twice yearly report on Mountain View Police Department performance and feedback data. Lieutenant Evan Crowe will present this item.
Thank you, Chair. So again, my name is Evan Crowe. I'm a police lieutenant at the police department. This presentation is going to cover the twice yearly report on the Mountain View Police Department's performance feedback data. And you can also refer to the accompanying staff report that's going to be included with the agenda. We will get started. See if I can do all the clicking, turning pages and reviewing it for at once. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be covering, little background as well, kind of background of the work item. We're going to discuss the different types of feedback mechanisms and performance data that the Mountain View Police Department collects. We're going to review the actual feedback and data for each of these mechanisms, and then we're going to discuss some next steps. Slide. As the board recalls, at the meeting back in October of 2022, you received a presentation and were given a staff report highlighting the different types of feedback mechanisms that are currently in place at the Mountain View Police Department and that were also under development. At that meeting, you were approved to receive twice annual reporting on several Mountain View Police Department's feedback mechanisms, including the following. So we're going to go over social media engagement, the MVPDX program, a moderated forum on the future of community policing, the informal police chief advisory groups, LCAC, which is the acronym for the Latino Community Advisory Committee, FLAC, which is the acronym for Faith Leaders Advisory Council. Those are the two chief advisory groups. We're going to go over Mind90, which is the customer service survey platform. We're going to go over personnel complaints, feedback and complaints for the School Resource Officer Program, and also RIPA data, which is the Racial and Identity Profiling Act. So we'll start with social media. Obviously, we continue at the police department to strive to integrate social media into policing. This is done across several different platforms, which we will get into in the next slides. And really goes with our philosophy of creating community connections, improving access, and strengthening our transparency efforts. And how we achieve this is through purposeful development of social media channels and long-term relationship building. Our approach is to provide transparency and insight through social media into operations, our culture, and important information such as criminal activity, road hazards, and other public safety concerns into our social media. And also social media gives us another way to have two-way communication about non-urgent issues. And all of our posts are shared in a more personal tone, and they're designed to tell meaningful stories regarding the culture of the police department. Slide. So we'll go into kind of some of our specific channels here through Facebook, Instagram, I guess that would be X, formerly Twitter, and Nextdoor. So those are our four primary ones that we utilize. They often share similar information. However, they do tend to have their own unique kind of styles and the information we're trying to get across. Kind of determining which platform we use. They also provide public notice about significant cases, and those are pretty well suited for our department Facebook page. Nextdoor is a little different. That kind of enables very specific information to specific neighborhoods. So if we want to target that neighborhood, that's really what Nextdoor is about, as opposed to putting out information on current events happening and other information. So we really utilize Nextdoor for that. Traffic related posts, they regularly receive a lot of community feedback on posts like that, which we obviously share directly with their traffic unit through our social media channels as well, based on the feedback that we get. Slide. A little bit of information about our social media and specifics in terms of our audience that we reach. This outlines a little bit of our engagement across Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly Twitter, and Nextdoor. Obviously, you can see by the numbers here in terms of just sheer accounts followed. Facebook is our largest platform. And just a little bit clarification on the numbers exactly, or excuse me, the definitions. Impressions, I actually had to look this up. Impression is basically the amount of screen time that our content gets, not necessarily someone that interacts with it. And engagement is actually an interaction. So you can think of that as like a like, a share, a comment. So that's actually the interactions. So you can see a little over 26,000 follower accounts on Facebook, Instagram, a little about 6,600, X, Twitter, a little over 27,000, and then Nextdoor, we have almost 23,000 claimed households. And then you can see the impressions and engagements associated with that. As noted in there, data for engagements is not a reportable category for Nextdoor. And then the demographic information is obtained from overall followers, not necessarily anything specific to Q1 and Q2. So that's just our overall demographics through all our platforms. Slide. We'll get into MVPDX now, which I know some of you are very familiar with in this room. So a little bit of background, overview on MVPDX, the creation, duration, some information on the cohorts, and also some of the feedback they received and how we're implementing that feedback going forward. So MVPDX, really partnering for the future of policing. It's a community-focused program that began in 2020 and has completed 5 cohorts to date. Each cohort is 8 weeks, and they consist of both experimental scenario-based exercises and in-depth conversations about various themes and topics related to policing. The program is was designed to foster dialogue and has served as a valuable method for our police department to receive feedback on a variety of issues that concern our community, including current events. The curriculum specifically for each cohort is designed based on past cohorts' interests, current events, like I mentioned, and then input from current MVPDX members that go through the cohorts. In terms of feedback from the program, has resulted in several follow-up actions, understanding, and to be quite honest, some real change. It has also been instrumental in conceptualizing other programs that are currently in the developmental stage at the police department. These programs include MVPDX program, which will be entirely done in Spanish, and also an MVPDY program, which is a condensed version of the original MVPDX program designed to connect department staff with high school students in our community, just provide more of an opportunity to have a voice with our youth and allow them the opportunity to really share their concerns and feedback with us. So we're hopeful to get those implemented as well. MVPDX specifically for this Q1, Q2 did not take place during this time frame, but we do anticipate it coming back in Q4 at the end of 2024. Slide, please. Moderated forum on the future of community policing. So as part of our commitment to the positive community engagement and a partnership with here at PSAP board members, on May 30th of this year, the first forum took place on the future of community policing, and it was held at Mauna Loma Elementary School. It was a discussion which included a presentation from Tom Myers, who's the executive director of CSA, and other MVPD members as well. And although numbers were down, it was very well received in terms of the people that were there and participated. So very well received. And actually the next event is coming up next week. Is that right?
At the end of the month, yes.
The end of the month, yeah, for the next community forum taking place. Slide. Moving on to the informal chief advisory groups. There's 2 informal groups that we are chief participates in. One is the Faith Leaders Advisory Council, and the second is the Latino Community Advisory Committee. Just a little background on the structure and purpose of both groups. This is stemming from MVPDX feedback with these groups. So these 2 were formed in 2021. We'll start with the Faith Leaders Advisory Council. Participants for this specifically include a range of leaders from different faith-based organizations and houses of worship specifically in Mountain View. They share ideas about how the police department can improve communication with congregations in the community, but also how communication can be shared and improved in these organizations as well. Bless you. It has also enabled better information sharing regarding resources for our community members who are unstably housed as well, which often, as you know, gravitate toward the resources of faith-based organizations and the services that they can provide as well. This specific group, the Faith Leaders Advisory Council, met 3 times in Q1 and Q2 with the event scheduled in October of this year. Moving on to the Latino Community Advisory Committee, also established in 2021, comprised of both civic and faith-based leaders with the goal of ensuring strong communication between the PD and the City of Mountain View's Latino community, specifically by creating access, information, and transparency with them and the police department. The Latino Community Advisory Committee creates opportunities to hear additional Latino voices, improve community safety, and enhance the department's relationship with our Latino community. This specific group met twice in Q1 and Q2 of 2024. And specifically in April 2024, we had an amazing event, kind of a version of our Coffee with a Cop. It's called Cafe with a Cop. is held over Latham and Escuela. Incredibly well attended by over 150 people, largely from the Spanish-speaking community. And Chief could attest to this too, is one of the best events in terms of Coffee with a Cop that we've seen, at least that I've been here, in terms of sheer participation, enthusiasm, kids, all of the above, the businesses, all in that. If you guys are familiar with the 7-Eleven, the bakery and other businesses that are there, it was incredible. So that one was amazing. So we hope to kind of build off that one for more with our Latino community. Next, we'll move into My90, which is our customer feedback survey. In August of 2022, we partnered with My90, which is our anonymous customer survey platform. Upon completion of a police department, I'll go through a little bit of how it works. Upon completion of an incident with the police department, a survey leak is sent to customers. These can include victims of crimes and witnesses, and also people making police reports themselves. This does not include, though, people receiving citations or being arrested. So this is not that category. The feedback that we collect includes the nature of the encounter, the level of satisfaction with the services they received, how they were treated, and the reported race, gender of the community member. This enables the department to view the potential differences in customer experience and feedback as well. The survey also includes an open-ended question where you can provide comments, and we can see those comments about how we can improve our customer service. But the vast majority of these comments were positive. We'll get into next couple slides once we get there about some of the highlights. And they highlighted our professionalism and respectful approach when we were providing customer service to the community members. Currently, with the information is shared with our management team and is used to help gauge the quality of our customer service, as I mentioned. Indications of bias or the perception of bias can also be viewed, and effectiveness of the officer's communication can really be a good way we can look at this feedback. And this information as well helps identify strengths and areas for growth. We've identified next steps for My90 platform to potentially include direct access by officers to their survey results and a public dashboard of My90 feedback. And we are currently working on a pretty robust public-facing dashboard with plans to incorporate the My90 data into that dashboard as well, which will be public-facing. A little bit more, get into the weeds a little bit of the My90 customer feedback survey. As you can see by this slide, when people were asked on the survey, how did you view MVPD? 87% MVPD is either very positive or positive. 8% had a neutral view. 2% had a negative view, and 3% had a very negative view of the police department. Moving on to the next one. This slide depicts the My90 community sentiment feedback, where an average of 93% of respondents felt they were treated well by the Mountain View Police Department when asked the questions about respectfully, fairly, listened to, understood the answer, and questions that were answered. In this slide, across all race and ethnicity groups, people in Mountain View had a generally positive view of the Mountain View Police Department, as you can see by their responses to this particular survey, or excuse me, question. Also, the My90 respondents, there was a slightly larger number of males who were contacted. And you can see in that slide, let me zoom in on my numbers here. There were 120 males, roughly 50%. And 114 females, roughly 48% that responded. And a large number, roughly 95% of the contacts were people 28 years of age or older. So you can see the 18 to 20 range was only 2 people responded, and the 21 to 27 were only 10 people that responded, about 4%. This next slide depicts, it's a little bit small, but I can relate the info, depicts the race and ethnicity of the people who provided feedback. So we had roughly 55% of the people who provided feedback who were white, 22% were Asian, and roughly 18% being Hispanic and Latino. And then the smaller numbers down at the bottom were the categories of Black, African American, Native American, Middle Eastern, or Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. Response to each. Thank you, Michael.
Sorry, we're both
Go
talking.
ahead. No, I had to turn off the Zoom.
Oh, okay. Is this where we should be?
Yes.
Okay.
In this slide, when they were asked about community safety concerns, as consistent with, I believe, with last year theft, consistently remains overwhelmingly the top concern from the community, with 39% of respondents citing this as their top concern with theft. With also the other concerns of homelessness, I don't have any. Physical attacks, traffic offenses, quality of life, drug use or sales, gun violence, and gang activity. For safety improvements, over half, 52% of respondents felt that increasing patrol car visibility would increase safety in the community. With the other responses being increasing community engagement, increasing information sharing, increased agency staffing, and increased officer training. We'll move on to personnel complaints. A little background as well. As you recall, the PSAP board was receiving quarterly complaint data reports. However, at the meeting in October again of 2022, it will now be included in this twice annual report. This report specifically in terms of personnel complaint data has the previous 6 months of data and also the current 6 months of data for this report. The information you're going to be receiving related to these complaints is going to be in the categories of origin of the complaint, sworn status, nature of the complaint, the disposition of the complaint, and the level of complaint. So with this slide here, you can see this is for Q3 and Q4 of 2023. So this is the previous 6 months complaint data. Of the 8 total complaints that the police department received in Q3 and Q4 of 2023, 3 of those complaints resulted in an internal affairs investigation. So the current Q1, Q2 of 2024, you can see by this slide, of the 2 total complaints that we received in Q1 and Q2 of 2024, 1 of those resulted in an internal affairs investigation. A little bit onto the SROs, and I know Sergeant Shen touched on this a little bit. Complaint data for the SROs. So if you recall, in our MOU for the SROs, it's a requirement for reporting any complaints, and I'll read it to you verbatim from our MOU. It basically says, the district and its administrators shall provide a mechanism for students to provide feedback, make complaints, or document details of their interactions. I go to complaints more than compliments more than complaints. Or document details of their interactions with the SROs. So Mountain View Los Altos High School School District has identified the principal or the vice principal for both the high school and Alta Vista as the administrative staff member who receives the feedback about the SRO program. Currently, 2 of the feedback mechanisms, are the Student Advisory Committee and the anonymous tip line. I will tell you that for this coming up year, we're going to be working with the new MVLA superintendent on looking at these mechanisms and ensuring that they're kind of consistent with what he wants. And then if there's any additional changes, we're obviously very open to receiving feedback from the students, because after his presentation, obviously, you know how important that is. We really want to hear from students if they're having issues. So they will be creating a new student advisory committee. So we'll be getting in contact with them as well. And currently there has been no feedback or complaints provided by the district to us regarding this requirement. Next, we'll get into RIPA, which is the Racial Identity Profiling Act. A little overview again. On January 26th of 2023, PSAP accepted subcommittee and staff recommendations related to the collection and use of RIPA data. If you recall, RIPA mandates that California law enforcement agencies collect data when a detention is made. And for the purposes of this, just for clarification, I think we spoke about this at a previous meeting too. Detention is when the person is not free to leave. That's when we have to report RIPA data. And the second mechanism is when if they're contacted and a search is conducted. So if I were to do what we call a consensual contact, where I talk to somebody, they're free to go at any point. I do not conduct any search. That does not require RIPA entry. If I were to contact them consensually, they're free to leave and they say, yeah, you can search me. Conduct that search, that requires a RIPA entry, but they're still free to leave at any point. Just to clarify that portion. The RIPA required data fields that we're required to report are the date and time, duration, and location of the stop, the perceived age, race, ethnicity, gender, and perceived LGBTQ status of the person stopped, whether the person stopped has limited or no English fluency, perceived or known disability of the person stopped, the reason for the stop, whether the stop made was in response to a call for service, and lastly, what actions were taken by the officer during the stop. In addition to collecting all of this required data, we do some additional data that we collect regarding whether the officer making the contact believed the subject was having any mental health concerns at the time, and at what point the officer believed they could perceive the subject's race and gender. And consistent with your recommendations from the board, this presentation and accompanying staff report contains 2024 Q1 and Q2 data, and that data was included in the agenda as well. So we'll get into a little bit of the data here. And I don't know if Michael, you might have to zoom in, but not on these first ones, but we'll kind of play it by ear. People want to see a little bit more detail. So this one, the first question was this initiated by a call for service? As outlined in this chart, a little over 15% of the RIPA entries were calls for service, and the rest were stops that were proactive contacts. Perceived ethnicity. RIPA data was able to provide ethnicity that was perceived by the officer, with the largest two groups being Hispanic Latino, which was 41%, and white being 24% of the officer's perceived ethnicity of the person that they had stopped. You can see the other ones in there as well with different ethnicities. Slide. Perceived gender, 71% of the officers' perceived gender were perceived to be male. And you can see the corresponding percentages for others as well. Slide. If there was perceived LGBTQ, 99% were not perceived by the officer to be LGBTQ, with less than 1%, 0.8 being yes, they were perceived. Perceived limited English fluency. From the data, again, a vast majority, which is roughly 90%, were not perceived to have any limited English fluency. Any perceived disabilities, 99% of officers perceived no disability during the context as well. You can see the other small percentages in there. Reasons for the stop. RIPA data also gathered reasons for detentions. So out of the total amount of detentions, 80% of the detentions were traffic stops. 12% were detentions based on reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. 2% were for consensual contacts, which resulted in a search, like I explained just a few minutes ago. 2% were known wanted persons. 0.3% of the stops were for known probationers or parolees, where a compliance check was conducted. And 6 were for truancy investigations, all falling roughly 1%. Excuse me, roughly 1 each, the rest. Slide. Out of the context, the subject's perceived race was not detected prior to the stop, but only after the first contact. So you can see roughly 10% of the perceived race was prior to the interaction, and roughly a little under 90% was at the first time that we contacted the individual. Same as well for their gender. When was it first perceived? A little over 11% was prior to the stop, with roughly 88% being during the first contact. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we gathered data from RIPA stops related to mental health. Officers perceived that roughly 92% of the contacts involved subjects who they believed did not have mental health challenge, while 4% of contacts the officer was not sure either way, and then 3% were perceived to have a mental health challenge. And obviously some of that stuff can change during the interaction, so this is just during the contact initially. Slide. Wrapping up here on the future of our reporting, we'll get into a little as we continue to prioritize transparency and also that transparency dashboard that I referred to a little while ago. Obviously at the police department, we are deeply committed to seeking out and meticulously reviewing our feedback data, performance metrics from various sources to include community members, stakeholders, and partners. And as part of our ongoing efforts to enhance transparency and accountability, we're currently in the process of developing several interactive and user-friendly transparency dashboards, as I mentioned. I mentioned dashboards a lot because we're super excited about the dashboards. And they're going to be easily accessible on the website. They're going to be designed to provide a detailed and comprehensive overview of our performance metrics, feedback data, and other pertinent information in an effort to keep the public well-informed and engaged. And with that, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Lieutenant. So do board members have any questions?
Yes. I have a comment and a question or a suggestion. The report of Cafe with a Cop with the Latino community in which you got 150 students and parents, that was really impressive. I mean, you mentioned it was impressive, but can't that be repeated?
Yeah, that's the
Were
goal.
they eager to repeat?
Yeah, everybody there who came and participated was very eager to interact and have that event again. Now, whether that's at the same location or we identify another location that would be hopefully just as well attended, I think is the goal, but the feedback was amazing. The partners we had, the partnerships from the businesses there were amazing because they wanted to participate. The engagement we did on our social media channels by advertising, for lack of a better term, I guess that's the right term, this in Spanish as well. So all the stuff was translated in Spanish. And so the flyers we handed out were in Spanish and English. So people, it was for everybody, but primarily attended by the Spanish community or Latino community. So it was amazing.
Well, I think it's especially interesting that you went to the Panaderia because it's a hangout.
So
That's great.
if I may, Member Brodowski, this came from recommendations from the Latino Community Advisory Committee, specifically, although we're familiar with Pandaria very well, specifically to go to the Pandaria and early in the morning hours, because so many of the parents from the community that we wanted to talk to, that we weren't seeing at other Coffee with a Cop engagements, would be there early in the morning. So this was a shift from our normal system. It was wildly successful, as Lieutenant referenced, but it was very early. I think we started getting there at 6:30, but started seeing folks about 7 a.m. And it lasted well past what we were expecting. But it was by design at the Pandaria, different hours, and from the Latino Community Advisory Committee.
I think that's terrific. Then I had another question back here. Oh, the question is, we have maybe 2 years of data, am I right? Maybe 3 points
Referencing,
on the WIPA data, all of the stuff that you presented today, I think we've seen at least twice before.
yeah, I
Not the same data, though.
presented last year. Yeah, so I think there's at least been presentation wise, at least, yeah, two years worth.
And so I think it's time to start showing graphs according to how things are changing with time. And I think it'd be really interesting to see that. And get an idea, are there things that aren't working or things that need to be attended and so on?
Other questions from the board?
That's all. Member Brodowski, that's all, really? That's
Well, I
all?
have one more. but
Okay, go. I was gonna say.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No,
I thought that was all
I-
your questions.
it was all, but then I thought of another one.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
Well, you have a special relation with the police department has a special relation with the Latino community and with the religious community. And my question is there some other community that ought to be attended that we aren't looking at? Anybody who feels left out, or are we at PSAB essentially representing the rest of the community? What do you think?
So although there are 2 informal chiefs advisory bodies and hopefully 3 soon, they are not the only one. There's a cross-section still within that faith leaders group that crosses over into many different communities, our Asian community, many senior citizens, different faith groups. But also these aren't the only mechanisms for engagement and outreach and for hearing voices. So we are actively participating in other community engagement activities. Present at St. Athanasius Church, speaking to communities, speak to and engage with members of our Asian community, support and participate in the Chinese Language Leadership Academy, as well as the Spanish Language Leadership Academy. So there's a number of things. This is the informal chiefs advisory bodies are some of them, but they are not all of them.
Okay, I think you really tapped into some need when you got that response from the Latino community. I'm just wondering if there are others out there.
I believe that there's, certainly capacity is an issue. And as it comes to language, the number of people that can speak a specific language may be as well. Our senior center, which is another location where we have a coffee with the cup event, that is certainly that, and that is very widely attended and a very positive community engagement, gives us deep connections and conversations about things that are important to our senior community across a broad range of the community, race, gender, et cetera. Very different interests. So that gives us a strong connection. We hear a lot at that event. In fact, the forums on community policing, that next forum that's going to happen next Thursday on the 29th will be at the senior center. So I expect that just by default of that location, we should be pulling in a number of more people.
How many people do you get at those at the seniors?
Well, the senior center's Coffee with a Cup is, it's a pretty packed house. I would say probably 100+ people are at the senior center. Some of them stumble upon us. Other ones come specifically because they know we're going to be there. So it depends. We'll go throughout the facility. We'll play ping pong, but also have conversations. We have translator officers. So we have conversations about things that are important and concerns related to our senior community in multiple different languages. Jan Leah is our community outreach officer. McPherson, forgive me, is a pillar at these events, as there are many questions related to services specifically for seniors that she's deft at answering.
And I'm a senior and I've never heard of them. But I think you're doing a
I
wonderful
would
job.
strongly encourage you to look at the senior center in Mountain View. It's a fantastic facility, or make referrals to it if you know someone who's interested. That is where we conduct that event, but and that's where we kind of draw from. And I think if we're looking at from that community, that's where the biggest bang for the buck is for the senior community for us.
Okay, thank you. And congratulations. Go ahead.
Any other questions?
I'm good. You always just have really good questions that make me want to ask other questions, but you did it.
I covered your questions, I'm good.
I have a couple questions of my own. Chief, you've been hyping this dashboard for a while.
Yeah.
Say it enough times.
Not enough. I think they're gonna be so good. So we did have some staffing turnover. The people that were designing the dashboards were learning how to design them. They are done with through a kind of a system that the city uses, GIS system with data and graphing. They are close to being unveiled. I expect that if not by the next meeting in October, then certainly by the end of the next meeting, we will have dashboards, transparency dashboards that are accessible and viewable. But I agree, it's taken a long time. We don't have dashboard specific staff. We have a fantastic crime analyst. And this has been one of her primary functions, is designing both the external community dashboards that relate to transparency, but also knowledge of crime and trends, whether they're traffic safety or property crimes, et cetera, but also internally to make our officers better equipped to respond to and prevent crimes. So kind of a multi-pronged approach, but it was slow for a while with the staffing that we had, but it has really developed momentum, and I'm optimistic we will have something prior to our next meeting, and if not, then certainly by the meeting after that.
Right, I'll hold you to that.
I would hope you do.
My other question is on the slide on RIPA data according to gender, there was an asterisk that said 2 entries that's just said man. And why was that an option? And then also.
It was in there. Sorry, were you done? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, well, I guess my 2 questions were like, why was that an option? Because that would irk me as somebody that really likes my data, really needs.
It's moving, it just needs a kitchen.
And then 2, was there like training provided so that, that could be.
So it was actually a terminology change within the program. So they got their information in. It used to be just man. I think it was woman on there, and they changed it to the cisgender man, boy. And so the option man was on there still, before it got switched to solely cisgender woman, girl, or cisgender man, boy, which is what it is now. So those two entries were kind of holdovers from when it was just previously man.
Okay.
To be clear, for RIPA entries, we don't make any of the terminology is imposed by the RIPA board essentially. So if they switch it midway, then hopefully that doesn't happen next year, but we may have to have more afterwards.
That would just annoy me so much. All right, one more time, any questions?
Yeah, I have one, or just a comment, really, and no, I'm not supposed to do the comment. I'll do the comment after.
Okay, all right. Would any member of the public like to provide comment on this item? If so, please submit a blue card, or if you're on Zoom, click the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone. Okay, seeing there are none, I'll bring this back for PSAP discussion.
I just wanted to make a request that the analyst professional come to one of our meetings. Cause
She will say that.
this is a person that you should all meet. Really, really fantastic energy and loves the work and really a great advocate for our department.
Request noted.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board?
On what we just heard?
Yeah,
No.
okay. We have staff recommendation? Cause it says a motion to approve the staff recommendation for other directions.
I think that is a holdover from a prior script.
Got it.
Please disregard.
Okay. Then that moves us into 5.4, ad hoc committee updates. Thank you, Lieutenant, for your presentation. Ad hoc committees to provide updates are the Committee on Forums on Community Policing and the Committee on Youth Substance Abuse. We'll hear from future community policing.
Yeah, is that me?
Yeah.
So we had one forum already, which we talked about at the last meeting, which was about the use of technology, crime trends, and community partnerships, which Tom Myers of CSA presented, and we had a few attendees. I think at the recommendation of Chief Canfield, we decided to relocate this next event coming next week to the senior center where apparently they have good attendance with this coffee with a cop thing, and so maybe that will translate into that. And the topics included for this one is like crime prevention and scams. And we're hoping, going to the senior center, that might get interest from seniors that are concerned about, technology and scams and online phishing and that kind of stuff. And we plan on holding another meeting in early September to discuss the third meeting, which I would guess would be sometime late September, early October. And I think that might be I lost my piece. And then, so we anticipate on a third meeting to discuss probably, in September. And I think that's action since that. Yeah, I think that's it.
All right, thank you, Member Langton. Questions, comments from the board?
That forum was really fun.
Yeah, well, come next week, it'll be even better.
I know it's like, it was really informative. It was a really good event. I'm super glad to go.
And as an open invitation, anybody wants to come next week.
So when is it, where is it? You're
Um,
just saying early
Next Thursday,
September.
7 p.m. at the Senior Center.
Yeah.
6:30.
6:30.
Yeah, so the 29th from 6:30 to 8:30.
Oh, it'll be in August, not September.
Yeah, I thought the third one was probably gonna be September.
Oh, so the second one will be.
The
The
committee
second
is
one,
meeting.
the second one is next, the 29th from 6:30 to 8:30. This might, so next week.
All right, that's the forum.
At the senior center on Esquella Avenue.
Yeah, I think crime prevention and scams, like I think having that at the senior center is a good move.
Yeah, I know my mom's always complaining about like, look on Facebook, she's like, oh, I don't want to click on anything, blah, 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 you know.
Yeah. Should we move on to youth substance abuse before we bring it to the public?
So I'll take this one. Sorry about that. So for the youth substance abuse, obviously discussions have just continued in general. Obviously, unfortunately, with the board member Wang not being here, but with myself and board member Brodowski, continue those discussions on substance abuse education programs that can be implemented now that the new school year is in effect for 24 and 25. Like I mentioned earlier, I did have a chance to meet with the new MVLA superintendent in August at the monthly challenge team meeting. Albeit a short conversation, I'm excited about his excitement for schools and what we can do for the schools this coming up year. Anticipated ensuring that our SROs have the current training for school-related substance abuse education. Obviously, substance abuse has changed in the education and what we're looking for and how we provide that information to students. So we want to make sure our SROs continue to have that up-to-date information because the substance abuse trends change frequently. So we want to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information that we can give to the schools for the education component. And obviously, next step as well, want to schedule a meeting with the school districts to confirm their availability. That's one of the kind of the hurdles that we had spoken about in some of our meetings about making sure and talking with the schools to make sure that they're willing to give us that availability to get that education piece in there because their time is very precious at the school. So we want to make sure we carve out that piece that we can get in there. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier as well, meet with the new advisory council, student advisory council at MVLA. So we can really get into some of their meetings. There was excitement for that toward the end of last year. Unfortunately, it came toward the end of the school year, so we really weren't able to get to one of their meetings because they were finishing up. But excited to meet the new advisory council and really have a good conversation with them. And then next meeting is to be determined.
Questions from board members? I want to ask this question for the public because we talked about this during the break. But I had the question about implementing DARE since it was mentioned in the earlier presentation, and I had concerns about the efficacy of DARE. And so can you just speak about the implementation of the education program, just so the public can get the details too?
Yeah, obviously there's nothing in the works necessarily to implement it. It's conversations that have happened. And there's been conversations like you and I had about the DARE program. From my understanding, the DARE program is completely different now than what it used to be, updated. And so we're looking at some of those trainings possibly for our SROs to get that updated training information to see, kind of get a gauge on what the program is like now and kind of make that decision with the chief of whether or not that's something to pursue with the schools. There has been excitement from the schools about it, but we really have to do our homework and due diligence on it to make sure it's something worthwhile that provides the correct information for there's a general school audience, but we really have to make sure that this is for our Mountain View kids and our kids at our schools. So it's definitely something that we're looking at to see if it's worthwhile.
Thank you. Member Brodowski?
If there's anybody else have a question about this, then my feeling is that the question was a situation with drugs of abuse in the school system and what to do about it. And we pretty much did our job. We proposed that this should be handled through the schools and through the parents. And I think that we finished what we had to do and that the committee should be disbanded.
So I'd have to take another look at the work plan item, but I think those recommendations, Member Brodowski, that you're speaking about will be drafted into a staff report for October and then presented and voted upon. And then at the completion of that adoption of those recommendations or non-adopting recommendations, then that ad hoc committee would be disbanded after that work item. So I think it's the point taken, work is close, staff report will probably still lean on that ad hoc committee, even if it's of one during that staff report writing and making sure it's consistent with those recommendations. And then in October, following that presentation, it would be disbanded.
Okay.
Or, like ended, completed.
Thank you.
Sure thing, I have one more question. Unrelated, or loosely related to that, but are all of our officers carrying Narcan now?
Yes, all of our officers are carrying multiple packs of Narcan. And we, in fact, some of the things that we did with that Faith Leaders Advisory Council was Narcan training. We've done Narcan training at the school districts. Narcan is not only really important, but is abundant on our officers in the vehicles. There's extra at our station. Yes.
Is that a respiratory thing? You have to inhale it?
Naloxone, I believe naloxone, it is John, now I'm embarrassed to try to say what it does exactly to a chemist, but it blocks the receptors for opioids. So it basically breaks off the opioid, blocks it so it can't move into the neurotransmitter, and it's ineffective.
Yeah, would you have to inhale it or
It
what?
is, it is, first of all, essentially, yes, well, not inhaled, but it goes through there's an injection that we use through the nostrils, so the vascular nostrils absorb it.
Do you have it with you?
I do not, I have it in my car, but I don't have it with me.
Yeah, no, that was, my question was, how do you, you don't have to. it's not a
Are you in
pill.
distress?
The mucus member.
No, that I understand. I just didn't know whether it was something you had to swallow or something you had to inhale.
No, we can inject it, but for our purposes, it is that's the.
Yeah.
It's like Afrin.
The brand name that we have is what we're using, specifically referencing by its brand name, but it is injected into the nose.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Would any member of the public like to provide comment on this item? If so, please submit a blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone. All right, I will now bring this back for PSAP discussion. Do any board members have comments? My comment is that, my comment is, it sounds real fun outside, but also, my other comment is the new DARE curriculum that I'm hearing of is called Keeping It Real. So that's my comment. Did you also have one?
No, if we're coming to the end, I have something to say at the end. But
Oh, okay, for item 6?
before we adjourn.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. But before we move on to item 6, just double checking. All right. That brings us to item 6, PSAP staff comments, questions, and reports. No action will be taken on any questions raised by the PSAP at this time. Do any PSAP members or staff have comments or questions?
Yes, I do.
If I leave, does that cause a problem?
Right now.
Right meow? Do you have a
Well,
pressing matter?
We don't have any action to take, so I don't believe it prevents us from carrying forward the adjournment of the meeting.
Can you wait for 1 minute?
I mean, yeah, okay, I don't know how much you're gonna.
John's got something important to say.
Yes, I have something important to say. We had a member here, Jeanette Wang, for three years. But she was terrific. And I think we ought to say something in the minutes, or at least in public, that we're sorry to lose her and that she was an extraordinary contributor to the PSAP. And I'm sorry she's gone. Thank you. Thank you.
We got to watch her grow up.
Yes, yes.
She was 16.
And she went so fast.
I think she
and
did
so far.
MVPDX with us too, right? Yeah, she did. So I
Yeah,
got
she did.
to spend 5 years
Yeah.
with her.
No.
I have a comment and a question. The first comment is, according to this website, Smart Asset, Oh, it's a personal finance company. Mountain View has been named one of the, what's that?
14,
What about 14?
best city.
Oh, yeah, you've been named one of the safest suburbs in the United States. Well, like, you know, pat yourself in the back, y'all. Yeah.
It's all our fault. She said.
I'm at, you know, like everyone knows, I mean, like a chief, you know. Lieutenant, yeah. I can't remember what your position is. Also lieutenant? No, I don't.
It doesn't matter.
Okay, pat yourself on the back. Captain, I'm sorry, I can't remember, rankings. My other question has to, I don't know if, Chief, you can speak on. Yeah, you should, go. Fly free.
Having trouble.
I don't know if this means, I mean, because we can't take action on anything. I mean, I have questions about the departure of Katie Nelson and the nature of that, or I don't know if you can speak to that at all.
My guess, I don't know what your questions are, but my inkling is that your questions would be related to a personnel matter and then would not be appropriate for me to comment on.
Got it.
So that's my feeling, most likely, but not knowing all of your questions. You know, I certainly don't know for sure, but fairly certain I can't comment on any kind of personnel matter, whether it's for that former employee or any other or any current employee.
Wait, Katie Nelson, is it what's that?
She's done it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
How come
Well,
nobody
now you
tells-
know.
How come nobody tells me anything?
I'll tell you after the meeting.
Yeah. We'll tell you that after. All right, any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Okay, go for it.
I had a conversation with a mobile dweller who has lived in my neighborhood for many, many years. And I asked her why. So now after the last set of signs have been put up in my neighborhood, they are now forcing her and the two other people who consistently live near her to move. And so there's two things about that. Number one, the commentary that she gets from the department is different depending on the officer who's visiting her, which can be confusing to her. She's a senior citizen. And secondly, I asked her why she didn't want to use the safe lot and she didn't know about it. And this woman has lived in this space for at least since the pandemic and maybe probably longer. And she didn't know about it. And so I described it to her and she was like, well, isn't that like not necessarily safe? And I was like, it might literally be one of the safest places in our city. And she didn't, I don't know if she believed me. I don't know if she understood what it was about, but she had no knowledge that it existed. And I just thought that was interesting and I wanted to share.
Thank you. That's upsetting.
Yeah.
So Frank, if I may, remember Frank, I apologize. If you could send me that person's contact or a little bit more information.
Sure.
Certainly, we would like to follow up both about the consistency of messages, but also about the available resources. I will say there's a lot of nuance to the requirements, and you can give a high-level summary or a very, letter of the law, high-level summary, or how things tend to happen and what is, more probable. So without knowing exactly what was asked and exactly what was answered, it's tough to kind of weigh in on that.
Yeah.
But more importantly than being an apologist perhaps for that question is I want to make sure that community member their needs are being addressed and we're able to follow up with them. So perhaps offline, if you don't mind. Circling back.
It wasn't a negative thing at all. It was just some people say this about the policy and some people say that about the policy. And so she just was never sure which one she was going to get and how that would affect her day. And so.
Understood.
Another comment that I forgot to make earlier. Why am I forgetting to make these comments? It's late, I guess. I appreciated the attention to the autism and trauma informed practices training our YSU officers have, especially because that was a big concern of former member IRs. So I just wanted to. All right.
All done.
Okay, we will now move on to the final item of tonight's agenda, adjournment. This meeting is adjourned at 10:04 p.m.
well past